Shinji and Warhammer40k. Chapter 19. Don't Cry For Me, Tokyo-3. Part 3. I give this fanfiction a broken marriage out of 10. It started as a day like any other. Shinji woke up first to prepare breakfast, and Asuka went to school. Rei didn't even bother to wake up an overworked Maya, and likewise went off towards the daily routine. Surveillance upon the pilots was flawed on so many levels. Fortunately, that also counted against everyone that had infiltrated that system. The Gretchen woke up reluctantly, and all went off towards their separate schools. A few of them passed the pilots by and said hi. Cute kids, really. Mana Kirishima was not an early riser, despite her upbringing. She was just easy to wake up, but given a choice would rather sleep in. There was some discussion about the teen soldiers, if it would be better for them to stay at the new support base for the land Dreadnought, but it was decided that school was still important. Having a taste of civilian knowledge and civilian concerns could only help. "Come on, Kirishima, get up!" yelled Musashi. The girl just turned over to push her face into her pillow. The bed was just too comfortable. "It's time for school!" As much as he hated using that tactic. "Don't you want to see your stupid Shinji-sama today?" Reluctantly, Mana rolled over. Her eyes were still somewhat glazed over. She numbly walked over to the bathroom, with Musashi yelling about not falling asleep in the bathtub again. Kato muttered something about not daring to follow her inside to wake her up again. She was a delicate girl, appearances notwithstanding. It was probably blood loss that was cause for more damage to Kate at that time than her axe kick of feminine fury. They lived under a roof with an entire unit of Marines, whose sole purpose was to bail them or young Carrie out of trouble. That, and to tease and perform various torments on their young charges. Babysitting duty was at a rotation, since for most of the time all they had to do was sit around and watch TV. A few, to relieve their boredom, took to learning how to cook. The results were palatable, if uncomplicated. Kirishima and company made their goodbyes and left. 6 people in the city were found dead as the sun rose into the sky. Kaoru's own biorhythm was such that he could precisely time his return to awareness. He woke up expectant, but as the day passed and his factors failed to report in, his enthusiasm dimmed. Once more he cursed the flawed nature of his body. He had to make a report to SEAL. Ikari was on the move. Oh sure, the old men would interpret that as Gendo, but he didn't care. Doubtless they would order him to perform a few reprisals. The angel attack would be a perfect time to get rid of a few loose ends. He had to wait. After all, people die, all the time, all over the world. Too many of them violently. Many murders in Washington 2, Berlin 2, and Kyoto 2 still remained unsolved. More would be added to the pile. He would wait longer. Mere loss of life didn't concern SEAL. They'd be more frantic over losing a not-so-insignificant chunk of their own assets. Kaoru drew aside the curtains of his window. He looked out at the waking city outside. Clearly, Shinji Ikari would already know about his presence and his influence on Asuka. However, as a great unknown, it would be too soon to move against him. Their confrontation would be inevitable. The meeting of 2 great minds with opposing ideals. He blinked. It was also inevitable that someone would try assassinating young Ikari. He, as an agent of SEAL, would be relaying important information about his location, personality, and habits. Shinji had a variety of options to preempt that, turning the tables on his enemies. Poison, litigation, sniper rifles, etc. All the usual tools. His eyes narrowed. He took 1 step to the side. A pane on the Monticello windows broke apart. He stepped aside again. A sheet of glass at around head height also abruptly shattered. The 3rd step brought him behind a curtain. He smirked. Oh yes, he'd underestimated Ikari too. School was supposed to prepare the young for the world beyond. In history, learning from the mistakes of the past. In literature, how to look for the future. They were given a writing assignment. What is happiness? To Rei, the answer was simple. Earlier she would only be able to give a dictionary definition, not knowing what happiness truly was. With the arrival of Shinji, she knew that happiness comes from many things. The happiness from having stomped a gang of deserving grots was a different happiness from the feeling of warm, loving flesh around her. Happiness of being given gifts was different from the knowledge of having served her duties well. The answer was simple. Before Shinji Ikari, she had none of those things. Therefore, happiness was Shinji-kun. However, knowing Gendo's need to keep her under control, such honesty could only impact on the efficiency of their mission. She disliked lying. Cunning, however, was something entirely different. Happiness is the knowing of what is right and proper, she wrote. Let Gendo interpret that as he would. Asuka had first to ask herself, am I happy? It surprised her truly to answer, yes, far happier than she'd ever been in Germany. People truly respected her for herself. Back at NERV, her position as team leader was unquestioned. Simulation after simulation had forged a true unit out of the pilots. Ritsuko and Mai were never condescending, while Misato was an uncomplicated woman. Asuka got along with a lot more people, for she was a lot more mellow than what she could have been. She was more willing to accept her own mistakes and forgive others. She resented Mana, if only by intruding into that. In another time, her words of self-praise were to mask her own contempt for herself, being rejected in favour of a doll, and it was an easy jump from having utter contempt for the self to contempt for all others. After all, if you cannot respect yourself, then how can you respect others? All of it was happening subconsciously. It influenced her personality that others would see her as simply too high maintenance and not worth the effort. In a vicious cycle, if she was unhappy, she could only lash out to make others unhappy as well. Look at me, was her watchword. That was no longer necessary. She no longer treated every criticism as a blow to her own competence or ego. The first step towards maturity was learning how to receive disapproval from others, knowing it was perfectly fine if a few did not like her. In fact, she was liking that, pitting her strength of will against her recognised equals. Even the bevy of little annoyances were simply what made things interesting. She just thrived in conflict. Butting heads with Kirishima was fun in its own way. Rei's baiting could be so subtle, and figuring out her words were made her in irony or not lent substance to otherwise bald conversations. Even losing was no object. She'd simply blame herself for complacency, holding herself to a higher standard than what others could ever expect of her. She was seen, she was listened to, and she was given the respect she deserved. The Reds were all athletic types, and they held her up as a leader. They were a lot more willing to follow by example than Rei's boring little troops of bookish boys and girls. She was a warrior princess. What more could she possibly want? Shinji. Kaoru. In short, romance. She was still only 14 years old after all. Asuka was blazing. She had such a nice time last night with Kaoru, and having kissed him again. So refined, so intelligent, and so fabulously rich. He practically owned the finest hotel in town, and was treated like a prince. By extension, she was a princess of the old stories. Shinji was not nearly so demonstrative. However, Kaoru had instructed to her the greater good, and a fabulous pendant. Shinji, as another pilot, trusts her with his very life, and gave to her a massive chain axe, which arguably should cost a hell of a lot more than any pendant. Kaoru saw her as a woman, Shinji saw her as a hero. Both were critical portions of her personality. She wanted life outside the Ava, while at the same time recognising that her life is the Ava. They both appealed to her, but on different fronts. She couldn't betray one to the other. It was impossible to her. She was just stuck. What is happiness for me? She thought. And she realised, this is happiness. She had thought back then that mere worship, mere victory was enough. Not knowing what the future could bring was better. She could say that from knowing utterly that boredom was misery. Not being useful was torment. Being ignored was hell. She had all that was opposite, so it was as close to heaven as she could get. Happiness is having your own place in the world, where you and the greater good may circle around each other, giving and being given. Mana wasn't used to such exercises. Happiness is getting enough sleep. Shouldn't that be obvious to everybody? Too many ailments had at its root not getting enough rest. Not giving the body a chance to just let go and heal itself. When you don't get enough sleep, your judgment is impaired, your actions less reliable, and little things start to get ignored or blown out of proportion. Seriously, she thought, unless it's a life or death situation, especially if it's a life or death situation, nothing should be so urgent that you can't make do with a few precious hours of sleep. Therefore, she agonised over the correct answer they were asking from the students. She looked out the window. Love. Love of country, patriotism. Love of self, narcissism. love of emptiness, nihilism. She'd never been allowed to grow too attached to any adult, for they meant the commanders of an Ender generation to be totally objective and focused on their duty. Love of family. She'd never known family. Her friends were that to her. The thought of ever excluding one of them from her heart was unthinkable. Supposedly, love of the nation was greater than mere love for the self or another. It was the highest sacrifice and the highest honour. But Mana Kirishima didn't know what love itself felt like. That was why she so desperately sought out its expressions. The softness of civilian life. She could be destroyed by it. Love of meaningless material things. Blech. She made a face. She remembered something she ran across in a manga. "Needless to say, I'll be stumbling away," she whispered. "Slowly learning that life is okay. If I can just find contentment, that would make it all right. Happiness is in knowing that you may leave the world a better place than when you were born." Toji's answer was similar to Hikari's. Knowing your buddies, having your girl by your side, and facing the future head-on was the gist of his clumsy wording. Hikari, for a sensible approach to essay writing, had seeing your family and friends happy, being with the person you love, and protecting the hopes of the future. Perfect happiness is impossible without perfection. Only the machine may approach such perfection, for the flesh fails and is prey to random foibles. Therefore, happiness as we know it is a product of our illusionary senses. Happiness is not to be found in logic, but in illogic. Beauty is the contradiction, perfection in a sea of chaos, the flaw in a tapestry of order. Suffering is being bound to the demands of flesh. Torment is from the lack of power and proper understanding. To be happy is to seek the opposite of suffering, to have knowledge, to behold all perfection and still be a part of it. To be perfect in oneself, one must let go of happiness. One must have the absolute knowledge, the absolute existence. In older times they called this nirvana, for the universe is a great machine, with its own laws and its own methods, unceasing, and in knowing what portion we add to its continuing effort can we find our own highest purpose. Happiness is like many other things, another fleeting thing in a dying world and in flesh that decays. Serenity and purpose is in fighting to build up and maintain our own chosen existence. Kensico read over his work again and nodded. Yeah, that sounded right. Right? Right. Hold these thoughts well, machine spirit of the notebook. My happiness is the happiness of my loved ones. Simple and to the point for Shinji, even if that might seem unrealistic to some. He only just called himself in writing, happiness of my people, in that line. Loved ones was a vague enough term. Even if it was impossible to please everyone, he should at least statistically be able to say humanity as a whole was safe and happy. To that point though, he had to worry. Things were only going to intensify, and those who followed him would have to put themselves in danger for the sake of the mission. Power is bought through sacrifice, and paradise is built bit by bit. So far he'd been able to keep Asuka from poking around where she'd get killed. Mana's own political protection could only extend so far. Raid already proved willing to die, and Maya was at greatest risk due to her proximity to Gendo and the amount of meddling she was already doing. While he'd said such an amount he'd never find a use for himself, it amazed him how quickly he'd rid himself of 3 billion thus far. Launch vehicles of 500 million each, plus payload of at least that much. He wasn't quite sure where he'd read of it, but it was always better to have killsats at your disposal than not. Easy come, easy go. That Ray Seal wouldn't be able to trace the funds the same way. He had to shake his head in disbelief. Why have that much sitting there gathering interest when none of them expected to last out the year? Shinji tapped his fingers idly on the keys of his school computer. Words formed. A true and persistent world government is only possible when mankind is no longer limited to one world. Be it nations or organisations, for it to exist only one thing is necessary. An enemy. If all the stars are... He blinked, realising with horror what he was putting to form. These thoughts were still too soon. The old order will cleanse itself. First he had to deal with the angels. He quickly held down backspace and gathered his thoughts. The essay still had to go on for... What was that? He glanced aside. Yes, Ray felt that too. The angel warning should sound soon. Matarael did not arrive until near sundown. The Magi noted that most angel attacks thus far were in the afternoon. The only exceptions were Gagio and Israfel, which attacked out of the sea. No one had any idea why. The most popular hypothesis was of predatory instinct. Like the angels knew humans were less suited for life in the night. That it was the reason humans made light bulbs didn't seem to matter. If the angels possessed intellect was still up for debate. Certainly they didn't seem to possess any method of language and society. Were they just monstrous beasts after all? That was more disturbing. That opened up the possibility that they were being sent as someone else's weapon. Kaoru himself didn't have much regard for the intellect of his kin. He specifically told Matarael to attack during mid-afternoon, while the pilots were still at school. In the end, old instincts won out. Predation habits against dinosaurs and other similar forms in other worlds. Angels tended to be huge beyond mere physical limits, after all. He was hiding in a back alley. It rankled having to hide, but with Matarael arriving later in the day, he couldn't dare bring out the full power of his AT field lest he give NERV advance warning. Absolute surprise was essential. Late! Damn that one, he was late! He was angry. He held the severed head of a black-masked man in his right hand, and slowly the cloth began to burn and flesh melted off, leaving a bare, grinning skull. He scowled and threw that into a nearby garbage bin. He leapt through the distance into the other building, eviscerating the operatives there. He scoffed. Just generic mercenaries, working for any bidder. Whoever hired them was therefore untraceable. No matter. Shinji Ikari couldn't be so crude. He'd forgotten that there were two Ikaris in Tokyo-3. Both were using each other as tools. Doubtless the younger was just waiting for him to approach Asuka again. He'd nothing to say about Shinji, unless he had proof. Revealing Ayanami was an angel herself couldn't help, as said other hybrid could force him to unseal his field. Speaking of all the things Shinji Ikari had already put to place sounded so unreal, even to his ears. Tokyo-3 was their city. Kaoru was at every disadvantage there. Forgive me, Shasso. I had forgotten. His movements may occupy both extremes of range. Nonetheless, he felt like laughing. While it was Gendo's tools that did this, it was Shinji who made it so effective. Whispering to his limbs in Section 2, who would whisper to their section chief, who would whisper to Fuyutsuki, who would mention it to Gendo. Voila! Near carte blanche. Gendo's explicit order to eliminate him as well was the only part of the plan sure to fail. Killing Shinji Ikari would be too easy, but also ultimately proving nothing. Humans were each too small and fragile. Together, however, they made wonders. Lilith had once defeated Adam, and it wouldn't be enough for the angels to recover their own source. Lilith had to be defeated. They had to prove themselves stronger. Similarly, if Shinji Ikari wanted him dead, then there would be nothing he could do to stop it. He and young Ikari were alike. Too alike. Only in their differences would they find triumph. It was so invigorating to have an equal. He'd been so alone in everything for so long. He would cherish it, that hate, until the fullness of time when the heavens shall shake, the hells cower, and the earth itself splits asunder as they clashed. Nothing less would suffice. For the death of his immortal brethren, nothing but utter victory, even against the height of the abominable enemy's power. Finally! He looked to the sky. Matarael was sluggish in its unprecedented new form. However, it was time to pit once again the unnatural strength of Lilith's methods against Adam's self-defined success. It was so odd, since their genetic memory knew only ceaseless triumph. Shinji Ikari. So much power in such a small, breakable form. How could he stand it? It boggled Kaoru's mind. He couldn't understand why all the bother about plans and manipulations. Such limited Lilith thinking. Power. Power was enough. Power beyond skill. Power beyond plans to effect. If Matarael manages it, then good for it. Kaoru still believed only he could stop that growing avalanche. Still, he was going to give Matarael every advantage available. Humans cheat. All the time. Might as well repay the favour. He took out a cell phone. Hello, Mr. Ryuji. You're still in the Geofront, aren't you? He ignored the various sounds of protest from the other side of the line. Yes, it is necessary. Look, only you can do this. You don't need to know more than that. The consequences of failing to carry this out, after so much preparation, can only be unpleasant. Kaoru put the phone away and jammed his hands deep into his pockets. He leaned against the dirty wall, with rusty pipes staining the orange of his jacket, and waited. Show me the future of man, Shinji-kun. Classes were out. Tokyo-3 was still bright enough not to need street lamps, and people were going about in their own separate concerns. Click. Electricity was the lifeblood of every city. With a whine, Tokyo-3 died. Without power, even the Magi was no more than lumps of metal, silicon and protein. A series of mirrors and artificial lights brought day into the geofront. As power cut off, NERV HQ plunged into the darkness from whence it came. Everyone within was caught by surprise, even Gendo and Fuyutsuki, who had been expecting it. They too were frustrated by the delay. The scenario demanded the pilots arrive in the nick of time. Gendo, in sweating and working with the employees of NERV, was supposed to remind them of their loyalty. Ordinarily, he would have made up some excuse of a sync test to keep the pilots close by. Except that Seal had failed to warn him when it would happen. Killing off their operatives so as the restart sequence wouldn't get back to the old men wouldn't help. Gendo deemed them too much of a risk, however. Just because he obeyed Seal didn't mean they could mess around with his project in his city. What for did they see fit to appoint him as the artisan of the Human Instrumentality Project? The Trident Land Dreadnought was nowhere even near his list of scenarios. Sabotaging that was impossible, since a piloted machine had several hard overrides. Security was tighter inside the joint exploit JSSDF/in his base, and every technician to touch the machine was checked and double-checked for liability. Mankind had a weapon to match the Ava's. It rankled him, since for too long he'd enjoyed being in a position of absolute superiority. What could it have been like, those men in the deserts, starving, half-mad in their quest for holiness, beholding a future they had no way of understanding? Rereading the specific prophecies revealed thus. I stood beneath walls wrought of glass and beheld a strange shape, a hulk of a thing, unlike a man, yet undoubtedly of man. Luck was its colour, yet fortune fled from it. And saith the angel, I weep for this giant, a slave that stands for the sake of its ill master. Hear the voice of the Lord, tears overflow in the third city. Its light is dead and its heart cleaved to pieces. Hear the promise of the Shining One, and this world will once more know the tread of my feet. I shall heal it and seal its fortress into the deep. Of the blood spilled in my name shall I write the songs from which worlds are built. Now everyone concerned had just assumed that it was the Ava. Slave, Rei. Master, Gendo. Or probably Shinji. It mattered little. Both would die anyway and return to odd existence, Rei from her clones and Shinji from being absorbed. It was all inescapable in the scenarios. Only so suddenly did it occur to them that the Dreadnought fit the bill, by its shape, its background and its purpose. It was shift change. Those on the bridge finished their mundane tasks and prepared to switch. The main operators, Ibuki, Hyuga and Alba, were supposed to give away to the secondary operators, the all-girl bridge bunnies Agano, Ui and Mogami. Hyuga had already left early. Maya stood up and waved down at the others below. Darkness filled all. "Ah!" screamed Maya suddenly. There was a thump. Hey, aren't you too old to be scared of the dark? Said Shigeru teasingly. He got off his chair and felt around the inky darkness for a flashlight. Emergency light should be turning on right about now. Red light switched on and bathed the command center in dim, harsh light. Maya! He shouted. The young woman had fallen face down. Ritsuko was quickly there by her side and turned her over. Blood leaked thinly from her nose and mouth. The doctor felt around Maya's head and neck. No signs of a contusion. She bit her lip. It might be spinal. She could have twisted it when she fell. You! Directed to Shigeru. There's a first aid kit in that panel over there. Get it! The lieutenant hastened to comply, while Ritsuko sat there, cradling Maya in her lap. She stroked the younger woman's hair, shocked at how vulnerable her soul-dependable shadow actually was. There were many aspects of her job that she found disgusting and degrading, but there were also others that proved such exhilarating mental challenges. Maya helped to make even the more mundane aspects of her duty seem fresh and exciting. It had been too long since she knew just the sheer joy of creating something new and unexpected. She feared innocent little Maya's judging of her, if the young woman ever got an idea off to just what depravity she'd lowered herself. Maya's enthusiastic acceptance and honest ideas allowed her, for a time, to forget just what NERV was all about. For a few precious moments, she could feel like a hero, like she was really out to save the world. "Dr. Akagi," said Gendo from his high seat, "why are all the backup generators not functioning?"
The geofront was designed as a self-sufficient colony if ever it is isolated from outside. It can't be happening, therefore that it would lose all of its power supplies, Fuyutsuki put in.
So this is deliberate. Obviously, Gendo was speaking specific word triggers for his scenario. Still, Akagi should have been up on her console trying to look useful at least. "Akagi," he said again.
"It can't be the Magi," she responded without looking back. "More likely someone had switched off the breakers either manually or with a hidden override."
"Then begin with restoring power. We are vulnerable to attack like this."
"What purpose would that serve?" Fuyutsuki asked. "If it's man that causes this, then likely it's more about research." "Knowing about his startup procedures," Ritsuko said, while still waiting. Shigeru came back with the medical supplies. "Maya, can you hear me?" She was still unconscious, but with normal pulse and breathing. Like a coma? Unnatural and dire. Ritsuko knew very little causes for deep, spontaneous unconsciousness, none of them less than severe. Gendo twitched imperceptibly. "Akagi," he said louder, getting annoyed at being ignored. "Later!" Ritsuko shot back. "It can wait. Maya first, then the goddamn computers."
That took the two men up on the higher platform by surprise. Ritsuko losing her cool over her assistant, totally unexpected. Gendo had already pegged Maya as a small annoyance, at best an object of pity for the scientist, as the mousy young woman tried in her futile little ways to stand beside her senpai, unknowing of just how tainted that glow was. "You forget yourself, Dr. Akagi," Gendo growled. "You are losing your objectivity. This is not the time to abandon your duty." Below, Ritsuko clenched her fists. She grimaced as if in pain. Shigeru Alba, seeing that, could only wonder. Did not the blonde receive yesterday's chocolate just magnificently in full view of everyone in the command center? Of course, Maya then handed an identical box to Misato, fueling no end of speculation.
"Maya knows almost as much about the Magi and the Evangelions as much as I do. Good luck trying to find someone as familiar with the Eva battle system and tactical analysis that even comes close to what she can already do."
She turned back, her eyes unseen as her glasses reflected red glare.
"Maya is too valuable,"
she said with great emphasis. Gendo hid his from under his hands. Maya had never been part of his scenario, and yet she was already influencing two of the more critical portions. Even more irritating, he could clearly see there was no one acting behind the young woman, all of it just the effects of random chance. Either that, or extremely accurate foresight, and such a gamble on so many random variables was impossible. Ritsuko held smelling salts under Maya's nose. The lovely lieutenant coughed and slowly roused back.
"Senpai?" "How are you feeling?"
asked Ritsuko, visibly relieved.
"Cold. So cold. Numb. Like a part of me is gone."
Ritsuko nodded. Muddled nerve signals. It fit with her correct diagnosis.
"Can you stand?"
I think so. Why is it so dark?
She squinted.
Or is it just me?
No, power's out all throughout the geofront. And since we supply power to the city, likely above as well.
She helped Maya back up to her feet. She glanced up at Gendo one more time, weighing in the consequences of her defiance. To hell with it, was her decision. She had enough of living in fear and desperation for his approval. There was a certain comfort in insanity, or deviance. The world was already well and truly mad. In times of madness, only the insane appear sane. In times of madness, that which is right might appear as insane, brutal, and cruel. Her own flexible morality had her obey without questioning, deeming herself already beyond redemption. Ritsuko had purposely cultivated a distance from others, a hedgehog in fear. But Maya, she should not be sucked into that putrid scenario. Wrong, wrong, wrong! Everything just screamed it, and for such an intelligent person, Ritsuko could live in denial. It was no secret Ritsuko wanted to die. Her chain-smoking hardly bothered her. So steeped in sin, it should be easy to corrupt Maya by her presence. Yet Ritsuko felt cleaner and more alive with every moment spent in the younger woman's unashamed admiration. But if she just knew... Ritsuko rinsed. She didn't see Maya roll her eyes at those flickers of doubt. Of course Maya already knew. Rei hadn't been reluctant, even at the most gruesome of things that were done to her. That didn't change anything. Ritsuko-senpai was still to her a good person, trapped by a web of lies and iniquity not of her own making. She longed for the day they could cut that down. And cut Gendo open. No qualms about that. They had chainswords.
Okay,
Maya said softly.
What do we have to do, Senpai?
We've got plenty of work to do. We need to turn on the operational layer of the Magi and begin a random startup sequence. We need to write that one on the fly. Then we have to fight the overrides allowing this to happen. Only then can we turn on the Magi and bring power back to the city.
She let go of the younger woman and watched her steady herself to a straight stance.
Think you're up to it?
Always, Senpai,
said Maya. The geofront, Magi's silence, was oppressive and just so wrong.
Whatever you need.
Gendo couldn't hear their words, and as such was doubly annoyed by their apparent closeness, a refuge away. More things getting out of control. The boy, JSSDF, now Akagi. Ibuki needed to learn her place again, even if she had to be beaten and shoved into it. A few still hours passed. Many shops had already closed up, and very few people were left loitering around the parks. Living in Tokyo-3 made people there already used to such small annoyances. Complaints couldn't reach down into the geofront, and all entrances were sealed. Breaking in just to gripe about it would be a criminal offence. Arbitrary politicians had nothing to offer but pleas of patience. A black storm gathered around the city, and deathly cold winds began to blow. In another time, Matarael would have approached unchallenged and weak because of that. The angels were supremely adaptive, becoming stronger the more they were attacked. With the young king in his city, that would only have led to a quick and useless death. The angel arrived from above, quickly and without any warning, right over the main street. Understandably, people began panicking and running to the shelters. It was unknown why Matarael had a spider-like form. Clearly those spindly legs were naturally incapable of supporting its massive weight. There was some AT field magic going on. The angel arrived floating in midair, with its legs folded up in a tetrahedral configuration reminiscent of Ramiel. It unfolded and touched the ground, its AT field as propulsion fading. Its jamming field abruptly increased. In a strange blitzkrieg, the city could call for help all it wanted, but no one would come even from just the next town over. Matarael slowly strolled over the city, unafraid. Click. Whine. Bolt of fire raked across its lower half. It let out a painted screech as purplish blood splashed down into the streets. The Ava assault rifle analogue, which proved nearly useless against many enemy angels, spat MBT cannon slugs in burst mode. The Great Bolter had more in common with battleship naval shells. Huge, explosive, and an insane overkill. Mega Bolters used the even larger heavy Great Bolter rounds, each nearly the size of a house, in unrelenting rapid fire. Unfortunately, the angel was just too big even for that to kill it. It opened its large red bottom eye, tilting its body, to see a large yet squat machine along the main road. It was painted over in bright blue and golden yellow. It lifted one of its stubby legs and stomped on the concrete, cracking it. It lifted the other, stomped again, and pitched its bulky torso forwards a ways like a sumo wrestler, which it did strongly resemble. Mana Kirishima smirked, as Magnos Tancred stood right there, unflinching against an enemy that literally overshadowed it. Flash! a positron being bit into one of the leg segments. More angel blood leaked. The land dreadnought then bull rushed that leg, body slamming into it and snapping it with a satisfying crack. Pain screech. If it could do a chicken run against an Ava and it was the larger mecha that would end up the one on its ass, then the spindly supports were nothing. Matarael tilted and toppled into a building. Magnel's Tancred sprayed its fallen form with even more megabolter rounds. The battle that would be known as Tears of Tokyo-3 was well on the way. However, the fight had actually begun almost 2 hours earlier. Shinji Ikari made the first move. The pilots, and one commander, of Projects E and T prepared to leave for home. The foursome walked together towards the school gate. Musashi and Kato walked a discreet distance away, unwilling to interact with Shinji Ikari. Out on the streets, Asuka turned and leaned closer to Shinji. She frowned as she inspected his face.
"Did you know you have this constipated look all afternoon?" she said to him. "What's wrong with... On second thought, I don't even want to know. I can't believe I used up an afternoon with that question stuck in my mind."
Mana chuckled lightly. Such random thoughts like that also reminded her Asuka was still a civilian, her prowess and capacity for violence aside. Although she too had been watching Ikari, her mission as a spy still ongoing and meshing well with her girlish aims. Tension and a slight frown, strange to see on someone usually so unflappable. "Something is wrong," said Ray. She felt itchy all over, but was far more adept at hiding her discomfort. Asuka turned to her.
"And what would that be?"
"Look," the blue-haired girl pointed out. The group stared at whatever she was pointing at. A cloud? A tree? A lamppost?
"What?"
Asuka continued. It was just a normal, everyday, empty street. Even that wasn't out of the ordinary, since by city standards, Tokyo-3 wasn't that big. Mass transport was utilised well. There were very few cars used needlessly to clog up the thoroughfares. Extra wide streets to allow Avas and other such monstrosities to pass through also reduced congestion. Mana's sight didn't have a civilian's preconceptions. She searched out locations of possible trouble, for hidden dangers and suspicious people. The street, as mentioned, was empty. There was a nasty storm cloud approaching over the horizon, but that was slightly to the left of where Ray was pointing. Birds were too silent. It was all peaceful. Too peaceful. They both realised it at almost the same time.
"Ah!"
gasped Asuka.
"The traffic lights," said Mana. "They're all off."
They both turned to Ray, who nodded.
"So what?"
asked Asuka.
"So there's a power outrage. Not like that's never happened before."
Ray shrugged slightly. "Consider, Pilot Suryu, where the power for this city comes from." She pointed down at an angle, approximately to where one of Tokyo-3's 4 small fusion reactors were. "Well, there have been power interruptions before. It has always been announced beforehand. For NERV to lose power without prior warning is entirely unprecedented." That brought Asuka to taking a thinking pose. Her face brightened suddenly.
"It's so simple. Why not just call them and ask?"
They were an important part of NERV after all. Ritsuko had never been unwilling to answer Asuka's questions, though their little discussions inevitably led to mutual griping. It was a good thing, perhaps, that Asuka was still too young to really drink. Asuka took out her mobile phone, grimaced at the unstylish shape of it, and dialed in a number leading to Ritsuko's office. If not Ritsuko, then Maya, or at least one of the other scientists and technicians who could find those two. Asuka held the phone to her ear and waited. She frowned and put it away after a minute or so.
"There's no answer," she told them. "Not even a dial tone."
"Eh?" Mana knew about communication systems being essential to modern warfare.
"Isn't that just a carrier signal? Landlines had that because of currents running through the wires. Handhelds only make that sound because people were already so used to hearing that."
Asuka took out and frowned again at her cell phone. Because of third impact, many luxury technologies never ended up being developed. The utter collapse of the global economy quickly put an end to easy personal computing and towards massive scale building. Case in point, Damaji. Only nations and surviving megacorps could afford such technologies. A handheld as a media device, capable of telephone communication, games, video, audio, recording and even internet access, was conspicuously unheard of. What a frivolous toy, many would have said, the symbol of a decadent society. Cell phones were larger, of tougher and more durable casings. Instead of fads and biannual upgrades to the next stylish model, most mobile phones were made in search of quality and durability. The resources needed to build complex circuitry were steadily dwindling. Certainly, NERV's issue were near military spec and expected to last the pilot several years of good use. Asuka took out a thick, plastic-covered card and inserted it into an empty slot in the phone's back. That was its concession to commercial use. Add-on modules, the staple of post-impact markets, trying to extend the utility of whatever they had on hand. That add-on was to allow the phone to receive and play radio signals. Asuka pushed the volume up to the maximum and held it up high. She thumbed through the radio frequencies using 4 and 6 buttons, 2 and 8 for fine-tuning. She got only static. Asuka narrowed her gaze. Hypothesis proven.
That's strange,
said Mana. She took out her own millispec phone and turned to her friends. The two were observing silently, leaning on the schoolyard wall.
Trident Base, this is Kirishima, do you copy? Over, this is Kirishima in Tokyo-3. Do you read?
Static as well. She put it away and watched as Kita brought out an actual military radio from his bag. The boys fiddled with it a while, then shook a negative at her. Mana looked up at the sky, still bright blue though starting to get cloudy.
This shouldn't be happening, she said. Is there something going on in the air? This is electronics jamming. Well, I do feel a little tingly, said Asuka while rubbing her shoulder. But that could just be the hot weather.
Shinji and Rei looked slightly surprised and gave each other meaningful looks. Keita and Musashi approached. The spectacle-wearing boy put in, Well, even really strong interface shouldn't scramble our signals so completely. The base has its own powerful transmitters. We should be getting something.
It's like an EMP burst, said Musashi. That's the only thing I know that can mess up all the bands at once.
Asuka scoffed.
But I don't recall any nukes exploding over Tokyo-3 earlier today, did you?
The boy soldiers both shrugged.
Hey, I just said it's like that, said Musashi, miffed. Do you know what's happening, Sayu?
Asuka smirked.
Isn't it obvious?
It is.
The Trident Land Dreadnought operatives looked puzzled at the sheer delight upon the red-haired girl's face.
NERV has no power. Tokyo-3 has no way of sending or receiving intercept orders. We're completely vulnerable,
said Asuka. She stretched out and turned to him, grinning. Her blood felt as if on fire.
Angel, we get to kill another one.
Oh, whispered Keita. He good-naturedly clapped his hands. As to be expected from Langley Sawyer the Great. He stopped at a keen look from Mana. None disputed Asuka's strategic authority when it comes to killing angels. The many simulations had focused on training that into her after all. Are you sure? Shinji kept his talents hidden there, and his strategic notions were very unlike hers anyway. Hers was useful battlefield strategy. His was really, really long-range strategy, the kind that sought out centuries of effect. Asuka had earned her place as the pilot's team leader. She had to get really, really good really quickly, for Shinji could get nigh precognitive at times, and even actually so. The young king would be useless if he had to command each and every battle, and for that he needed capable generals. He smiled faintly. This was Asuka's first true test. Without Masato or my direction, what would you do?
No, of course not. But there's no harm in preparing for it, right?
She looked up at the sky.
It's not like we have anything better to do, right?
She stared at her fellow pilot, who nodded in assent. His smile grew wider as he was facing away. Just admitting to the possibility of a mistake was already a journey far travelled. There are two types of confidence, the one born from self-delusion and the other out of hard-won victories. Asuka held one that wouldn't just give up, even dying in the attempt if she had to.
I guess we better head to the base too then,
said Mana. She looked doubtfully to the west.
If the trains aren't working,
she sighed.
I might need to hotwire a car.
I might be able to help with that, said Shinji.
Eh?
Asuka understood why Shinji was friends with Kensico. Both were knowledge sponges, except that where the geek held a variety of useless knowledge, the pilot had strange and oddly appropriate skills. He looked around and saw a tall, passing senior. "Gosen-san!" Shinji shouted out. The student turned and saw the young Ikari waving for him. Somewhat hesitantly, he approached. Yasakari-san? He asked. It was actually the first time ever that he was in the midst of the prominent pilots. He already had a girlfriend, so he wasn't part of the colour cults. Sorry to bother you, senpai. Shinji bowed. But could you please send a message to Kensuke? Please have him know that I need the colours up on the roof. The senior considered briefly. Sure, why not? He turned around and headed back into the school. It wasn't until he was up on the steps to the 3rd floor that he realised, what the hell? Why am I obeying an underclassman, even if it's a carry? I could just snag another student to do this chore. Still, his feet kept moving. There were a few students left in the school. He stepped in front of a sophomore girl and asked, Pardon, but do you happen to know where Ada is?
Oh, he's up on the grade for the mechanics club, senpai.
Gosen nodded and moved on, all the way up to the roof, 5 stories up. He found there Kensuke, in his white jacket, among a huddled group of boys. He moved closer to see that in the circle they had an odd machine with a bunch of wires leading to several bulky remote controls held in their hands. For some strange reason it was already painted over, as if going through massive battles.
Just because the Dreadnought is more stable on its feet doesn't mean that balance isn't a troublesome issue,
Kensuke was saying.
See? If I tilt the body in any way, the mass would send it toppling, and unlike the Ava, it can't get back up so easily on its own. It doesn't have arms to serve as counterbalance, but because of its stubby shape, a wide stance with its feet makes the limited tilt to the side well within its stability range. If we move one foot slightly in front of the other, the forward and backward tilt is also addressed.
But standing still leaves the Dreadnought vulnerable, said someone.
That's true, Kensuke answered. That's why that same tricky issue of balance is what helps the Dreadnought. Okay, Kanata, move it a little.
The model Dreadnought lifted one leg and pitched forward. Hurriedly, the controller put one foot in front of the other to keep it from toppling over, and made the model run right into someone on the circle of observers.
Ugh! Like an aircraft, inherently unstable, Kensuke continued. Momentum's what gives the Dreadnought agility deceptive to its looks. Note that the waist has full 360-degree notation.
He took the waist remote controls, and with both hands had the model walk back, turn and move about in a small circle. The others clapped. You sure know a lot, Kensuke. It's like you're on the design team or something. The glasses-wearing teen merely smiled a bit. He didn't need adulation. It was enough that he had built well. The senior on an errand coughed to get their attention. Ada-kun, he said. Ikari said he needs the colours up here, whatever that means. Kensuke made a and waved aside.
So it's come to that, eh?
He picked out one from his group of associated builders.
Say, Kato, go down to the chemistry club, would you? Tell them I want the red, green and yellow smoke bombs.
Kensuke's voice of authority was different from Shinji's. Of the latter, many found themselves obeying as if it was second nature. Those who obeyed Kensuke's errands did so amusedly, knowing he couldn't be everywhere at once. Kensuke would never send anyone to do what he wasn't perfectly willing to do himself, but just that he had too much to do. Soon enough, the errand boy returned from the chemistry club hideaway with 4 large canisters. Jun Gosen watched as the experimental engineering club set up a field mortar-like device. Kensuke loaded in the canisters. Thump, 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 one after the other, into the sky. 3 closely spaced explosions splashed colours into the empty blue. A short while later, similar plumes of coloured smoke rose high above other schools and certain buildings, responding to the challenge. A strong wind blew, spreading the colours further, and sending Kensuke's white jacket flapping. What's that do? Asked the senior.
Heh, it's better if you don't know.
Kensuke clapped his hands together. May you find happiness beyond your sad fate, machine spirits. A few minutes later, a black sedan swung past the very same curve Maya passed yesterday, and in the same reckless abandon, it screeched to a stop right in front of the pilots. The black-tinted window of the left front seat slid down, to reveal that the car was of foreign make, being left-hand drive. Yo, said Agent Jiro, poking his head out of the window and smiling.
Oh, you guys again,
Asuka muttered. Unlike Shinji, she just couldn't get comfortable with the idea of grown men always spying on her. So, the phones aren't working, said Agent Jiro to Shinji, with a brief nod to Rei. We're not your taxi service, you know? Sorry. The pilot bowed deeply.
but could you take Kirishima-san and her friends over to the Trident base? The younger agent brought his arm back in to open the rear door. Hop on, he said to the Trident teens. They went in, belting themselves securely. They looked about in some wonder at how spacious and wasteful the old automobiles were. You're going in that thing? Asuka said to Mana with exaggerated disbelief. You're braver than I thought.
She's dissing the car. Nobody disses the car, Jay. What should we do?
Ignore her. Maybe she'll go away, responded the other in the driver's seat. Asuka smirked. And I can tell you two have been following Shinji around a little too long. She patted the Ford's admittedly worn roof, as like someone had fallen onto it from a great height, and the bumps beat him back into place. Look, just take care, okay? Make sure they get there in one piece. That moment of concern made everyone stare at her oddly. Hey, she said, just because I think an Ava is better doesn't mean I want them to die just like that. You want to fight an angel, Kirishima? Fine. She grinned. Let's see what you can do. I won't disappoint you, Siryu, responded Mana with an identical challenging grin. A rivalry just wouldn't be as much fun if they could improve each other as equals. Thus, off went Kirishima and company to their moment of destiny. Several minutes later, a doorbell rang. Megumi Asagiri answered the door and saw there on the doorstep a small child with 4 small pigtails.
Yes?
She asked, while to herself, how'd this kid get up here?
Yo, lady,
said the child, in accented English, then back to Japanese.
this is the Asagiri place, right?
Yes, she said again.
I got a delivery to make for some old guy named Asagiri. Is he around?
The young woman smiled a bit. She was in college, but even there, just knowing her father was a general made people too formal around her. The military's power in Tokyo was at a peak since pre-World War II levels. A little bit of irreverence was so refreshing. Father, she shouted indoors, there's someone to see you.
Show them in,
he replied from within the bungalow.
What's wrong with this TV?
Only minutes earlier there was a clear picture.
Yeah,
said the Gretch. She stood implaceable in place.
get him here so I can hand over the word and get out of here.
Megumi's lips twitched. All right. In the end, the general nearly needed to be pushed out to the door. He looked down at the cute child, standing there, wide-eyed and completely unafraid.
Hello, what's your name?
He asked gently.
How many stars are there on your shoulder?
She asked flatly. He blinked.
3,
he said after a while.
Then this is for you.
The Gretch pushed a white envelope at him. As soon as it was in his hand, she fled.
Hey!
She was already gone. The general stared doubtfully at the letter. He sniffed it and felt around for any suspicious bumps. After a while, he decided to just risk opening it. He read, Asagiri-san, if you're reading this, then it's likely Tokyo-3 is under surprise attack and I'm unable to do anything about it. Communications are probably cut all around. I'll try to do what I can, but at this point Kirishima-san should already be at base. Likely she already set out even without orders. I beg that you forgive her this instance. In addition, if it's possible, give her the prior orders so she wouldn't get in trouble if someone should call attention to it. I apologise for the presumption. Shinji Ikari. General Asagiri frowned. He shouted to the sailor.
Oi, Megumi! Are the TV channels still out?
At a negative response.
Then check the phones. Dial Tokyo-3.
Nothing.
Call the base then and arrange for my pickup. Yes, please, I'm saying please.
He tore up the strangely prepared letter and disposed of the evidence behind a row of decorative flower beds. Interesting. He wondered if Akira got something similar. It should be noticed that his bungalow was on the outskirts of Tokyo too. A helicopter soon arrived to quickly bring him to the UN Fuchu HQ. The Boys Hut in Tokyo-3 received a report from the Boys chapter in Tokyo-2. All phone lines were down. The Gretchen used wired telegraphs. Dit, dash, dash. They even had a small generator in the basement. Somehow a wire was strung from their hut onto the electric poles all the way across the Kanto region to different Da Boys huts all over the nation. It was amazing, really, what people would let you do if you just wore official electrician clothes. Hoko Construction reached out to many different cities.
It was the only outgoing communications line in the city that actually still worked. It was crude, but totally independent of all computers. One of the things the book said was to keep a stash for each family. Prepares for the worst, it said. Suzuhara Marie sat in the basement, checking that big pile of food, drinks and batteries. Get set to infiltrate, the colours in the sky said. The book was still their gospel, but like any organisation they had to separate ideals from actual laws. So Ayane-san created the Rah! That way! Codex of conduct. There may be no innocence, only degrees of guilt, but Shinji loved children anyway, just by having nearly nil of it. Among his loftiest and most immediate goals was to have them always safe and happy.
Well, now it's our turn, said Asuka. We've got to make contact with NERV.
That's a good idea, Asuka, but first, please don't move, Ray. Shinji put a hand on her shoulder and, using her like a post, bent up his foot to adjust his shoe. That simple gesture hid the only thing necessary. Skin contact. Maya, what's happening?
It's dark down here, Shinji-kun. Power distribution's been sabotaged.
So the reactors are still alright? Can we get in?
There isn't any danger with that, at least. But all the systems are down. You have to try and get in through manual hatches.
Shinji felt a hand upon his, lifting it up from Ray's shoulder. He nearly lost his balance. He looked up to see Asuka frowning at him.
We don't have time to dilly-dally, third child,
she said, using her own weight to support him. He grinned weakly. Sorry. He got back up to his feet. But how do we get into the geofront? Ray pointed to a far-off building. We may enter through Route 7 over there.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Let's go!
Asuka went off, not looking back. The two other pilots smiled at each other and followed. She's really putting this to heart, isn't she? Shinji said, pleased. Simulations cannot compete with the real thing, replied Ray. Her purpose demands expression. After all, greatness can only be earned, not given. A dark cloud slid closer. Kaoru felt like hitting his head on a wall. His brethren strode the line between cunning and rank stupidity. Camouflaging oneself as a cloud and absorbing all radar to approach in absolute stealth was brilliant. Moving to Tokyo-3 at wind speed, in sublime accuracy of the skies. Less so. Deep within NERV, Maya followed Ritsuko down dark corridors. Conspicuously, Maya was armed. She brought it out only when they were away from the command center and wandering alone in the eerily silent passages. This puzzled the scientist, as she had her assistant pegged as an absolute pacifist.
It's a boat pistol. Safe boats,
Maya said.
The darkness. I don't like the dark, senpai.
Do you really believe you're in danger this deep in NERV, Maya?
The younger woman's expression was hidden by the flashlight's glow.
Sorry, but I don't like feeling vulnerable. I'd rather have and not need this than need it and not have it.
She rubbed at her upper arm, looking vulnerable anyway. Ritsuko nodded and took no more issue. Her kidnapping along with Shinji. NERV had no psychologists on staff. Actually, that would most likely be her as well. And Ritsuko hadn't simply bothered to ask if... Well... It bothered her now, and too long had passed that it was just awkward to ask. Many signs pointed to yes. Maya's continued infatuation with Shinji, a boy nearly 10 years her junior, was perhaps a sign. Someone who could never harm her. Someone who could make her feel like she was in control. That was the conventional assumption. In reality, Maya had no problem with giving up all control. There were very few things Maya still feared, and the darkness not among them. The convenient darkness, though. What and who might lurk in there? Even at full staff, NERV was never really filled. Infiltration would be so easy, whatever manner of devious doings possible. She feared harm to her beloved senpai. The darkness was no veil to her battle sister's eyes.
The air's getting stale,
said Ritsuko, trying for conversation to relieve the tension.
So strange to think this is supposed to be the pinnacle of human technology.
A thin laugh.
You're funny, Ritsuko-senpai.
I am?
You make me laugh. This? The pinnacle of what humans can do? No way!
Maya made the flashlight spot dance around the corridor.
There are still greater things we have to do. The world is not enough. The stars must be ours as well.
I never thought you were the type to go for that kind of science fiction.
I plan on living long enough to see it become reality,
replied Maya,
shining a light on Ritsuko.
How about you, Senpai? Would that be nice? Our souls would no longer be trapped by the wheel of gravity.
Now it was Ritsuko's turn to laugh. So, you want to live in a space colony?
There shall be a world known as Maya,
she replied. And there shall reside the most feared females in all the known universe. Demons and angels shall tremble at their passing.
It'll be a nice place, with mountains and fresh air.
The surface would be left unspoiled. All critical assets would be at least a kilometre underneath the crust. The battle barge Breath of Life would be based upon Red Castle Orbital Station. Ritsuko laughed some more. You don't dream small, do you?
What else are dreams good for, Senpai?
The other's light was brought to her face, and her expression was all too innocent. Ritsuko smiled sadly. Maya. Oh, the hell with it. It wasn't as if she could lose much more of her dignity. She drew closer and pushed Maya to a wall. Don't ever change. Maya's flashlight dropped to the floor and rolled away. The Trident home base was a small flat space along Internation Highway 138, in a valley carved out in the slopes of Gora by Israfel's destruction. To get there, one could either use IH-138 or the overbuilt Twin Terror Tunnel Road. That was a direct route, though it pitched sharply down. A black Ford sedan went screaming down the road. The MPs patrolling the base barely had any time to react as the car just blew through the roadblock, splintering the wooden barriers. The reinforced hood was barely even dented. It screeched, it spun around, reeving as if drunkenly, then finally to a stop. Immediately, a horde of assault rifle-toting soldiers surrounded the car. They tensed as the door approached. Musashi emerged. He said in greeting, and puked all over the tarmac. They relaxed a fraction. Soon enough, the three Trident teams were out of the car and meeting with the base commander. The Section 2 agents headed back to the city to do whatever it was that they still needed to do. The three still looked slightly dizzy, but determined to set off again. Why? Asked General Ogawa.
Tokyo-3 shut down right now, replied Mana. It might be under attack.
The man crossed his arms and leaned back on his chair, understandably reluctant. What about the Avers? He asked. Without orders, it would violate the NERV/JSSDF autonomy. Tokyo-3 was supposed to be off limits, though the Avers themselves can operate outside of it until the UN surrenders command of the field in an emergency. Last thing we need right now is more interference from Akari, the older one. Getting the land to build a base here was hard enough.
With all due respect, sir, we don't have the time to worry about that, replied Mana. Without power, NERV has no means of detecting or intercepting threats. If necessary, we need to buy them time.
There was a knocking at the office door. In his project chief Shiro Tokita was let in. Ah, Tokita, the colonel greeted him with relief. Shouldn't NERV have their own diesel generators? Normally the military and corporate motives didn't get along, but strange times made for strange alien alliances. Well, sure. In fact, they should have it operating by now. But the way I see it, if we aren't getting any power, then it doesn't matter how many generators they have. If the distribution system's shut down, then they can't move anything on their own. The base was linked to Tokyo-3's power grid. When that supply cut off, they switched over to diesel. Putting aside if we should, can we launch? Sure. NERV might like dramatic startup sequences, but you know us. Switch on, head out. Or, he grinned at the teens. Sit down, kick ass. Awesome! Cried Musashi. Sir, may we? Kato shrugged, smiling as well. We do have an onboard nuclear reactor, after all. Mana looked thoughtful.
I think NERV could use that, she said. Magnor's Tancred has an output socket, doesn't it?
Ikari was rather insistent on that. The in-his representative shrugged. Which one? What, you'd think we'd let the bastard anywhere near our design plans? The base commander looked at all the enthusiastic faces, from the three young ones to the older but no less excited. Fine. Trident team, you have a go. The three stood up and saluted sharply. Yes, sir! Makoto Hyuga in another time would have his moment in the sun when he brought in news of the angel attack into a blind and helpless NERV. He would have seen it while out picking up Misato's laundry. However, it was late afternoon.
That show of consideration was done. Makoto was at Hinano 2, browsing through the reprints. It was going to remain open as long as there was still light to see. The owner still had to recover costs of building and restocking. It always interested the shy lieutenant to see the cultural signs as shown in popular entertainment. The bloody fascination with gladiatorial combat was a significant hint towards Rome's decline, after all. A world without great wars and great heroes made up its own myths for their time, as presented by society before Second Impact. In times of moral ambiguity and easy living, they searched for the unashamedly clear, the truly altruistic, the hard-won and the magical. There was still real-life hardship, but those seemed even more remote and unreal, painted over by the eye-catching shades of mass media and money. Post-impact literature was either blatantly escapist or blandly informative. Even as humanity recovered, the message was pretty much, hang in there. Only recently was there acceptance of the heroic motif, warlike themes, and a return to the bittersweet realm of the love comedy. He wasn't sure if this was because of Shinji Ikari, or if the boy himself was just a sign of the changing times. Whoomp! Whoomp! In another time, helicopters would have been relaying warnings to the populace, as the JSSDF detected the Matarael on its approach. However, the Angel's stealth in that instance was perfect. Whoomp! Whoomp!
Due to the possibility of an attack, please be advised to take shelter as soon as possible,
a young female voice blared out into the main street.
This is not a drill. Please vacate the streets and head for shelter. Due to the possibility of an attack, please be advised.
They ran for shelter, immediately. They relayed that message to others they passed by along the side roads of Tokyo-3. A hulking Dreadnought walked down the extra-wide main streets. People couldn't help but take that warning seriously. Makoto looked out and grinned. He put down whatever he was browsing through and headed off to the middle of the street. Those seeing him thought, is he an idiot? He's going to get killed! They'd never seen a machine before, but they had a pretty good idea that if it was about the size of an Ava, then it's probably dangerous.
Please take shelter as soon as possible.
Mana sighed.
All right, I'm tired. You take over.
The youthful female voice was replaced by a clipped boy's voice. Please vacate the area, said Keita. Due to the possibility... Hey! Down here! Makoto shouted. He waved his arms about, trying to catch their attention. Stop! Hey! Whoomp! Whoomp! Of an attack. Please be advised to seek shelter. This is not a drill. Stop! Hey, can you hear me? Over here! The Dreadnought shadow passed over him. God damn it! It is dying! Stop! Whoomp!
Hey,
the external speaker said.
There's this crazy guy down there,
noted Musashi, pulling back on the throttle. Makoto waved up some more. Hey, Trident! Oi! He shouted. I'm Makoto Hyuga! Oh, I remember him. Keita's voice went out. You work for NERV, right?
Well, duh, he's wearing the uniform,
Musashi shot back.
Hello, sir,
said Maya, as he was a lieutenant after all. The land Dreadnought tipped forward a bit.
We need to get in a NERV. Could you please help us out?
She asked as cutely as possible. It was distinctly disturbing coming out of a massive war machine. Yeah, me too. I think I can lead you to a side entrance. He cupped his hands over his mouth. Can you take me there? You don't need to shout. We have automatic audio filtering software, Keita added. Flick. Brrr. A panel upon the Dreadnought's underside opened up and a strange chair suspended on 3 thick strands of metal wires lowered. Makoto strapped himself in. Though the Dreadnought was only just under half the size of an Ava, it exuded such a massive scale in every direction, bulky and uncompromising. Slowly he was hoisted up past seams of metal and machinery, finally into a cockpit deep within the central torso. Permission to come aboard? He asked. He was unsure about the protocol about that sort of thing.
Welcome aboard, sir,
Mana saluted him from her raised chair, very much like a captain's seat. Below her, so that she had a full view of their screens, were the pilot and gunnery stations, respectively. In the debate over who had command of the highly unconventional weapon that was the land Dreadnought, it was the army that won out, by virtue of its being on land. In operational doctrine, though, the navy held sway, since the most the army had on file was, stay out of its way. Never before had anything fit so well the notion of a land ship, which was the original designation for a tank. By its sheer size and firepower, it had to treat main battle tanks like a destroyer screen, and the Air Force as air power from a carrier just off the horizon. "It's surprisingly roomy," Makoto had to say. He stood up and reached out, and his fingers just fell short of touching the command ball's roof. "Magno's tank grid uses semi-monocoque construction. That means we don't have an internal frame as a skeleton to bolt components onto. The armor actually helps to hold things in," Kato noted. He pointed down. "The supporting frame is just a hollow cylinder around the reactor, and a U-shaped bend from the waist up to the arm connectors." "Ah, that's impressive." He worked with the Ava, and the biological components made the machine weapon lighter and less massive than what it should be for its size, yet also that much more complicated. "What's the top speed on this thing?" Musashi grinned fiercely. 45 kilometers per hour off-road, 55 on the road, but we're not going to leave much of it once we're through. He pushed at his dual control sticks and had the Dreadnought moving again. "We actually need to slow down to around 30 just so ground pressure doesn't get too much of each step." He turned around. "So where's this entrance at?" Turn left at the second intersection and follow that towards the hill. There should be an Ava access point there. Maybe the technicians can help us patch power to the elevator."
Magno's tank grid has 2 output sockets, 5,000 and 120 volts respectively,
Mana added proudly.
"Wow, you guys are good."
His admiration of the jet alone / in his crew was justified. He should never have let his own employment prejudice get in the way. Ritsuko and Maya returned to the command center, a train of NERV crew following in their wake. "Status report," Gendo commanded from above.
"We ran diagnostics and isolated this region from the power grid. In this level alone there are 8 fuse rooms, all of them down. I don't think anyone could have run all over the geofront flipping switches."
"So, hardware or software fault?" asked Futsuki. Ritsuko sat down on Maya's chair and sighed heavily.
"It's complicated," she said.
"It's generally a bad idea to link life support to a system that an enemy can network to from the outside,"
Maya explained.
"The Magi is separate from the dumb power and environment control systems, so if those are compromised, we need to use the Magi as a hard link to clear the system."
"But we can't turn on the Magi without reinitializing the power grid, which would just shut down again. We can't turn on the power grid to turn on the Magi without the Magi."
She groaned. "A strange predicament." Futsuki had to agree. Both he and Gendo wondered if it could be some sort of reprisal. No, the time frame was too short. Likely they both decided to just intensify their actions against each other at the same time. How suitably ironic, the older man thought with some amusement. "Do you have a solution, Dr. Akagi?" Gendo asked. Ritsuko rubbed at her face.
"We need something to provide power to the Magi. The diesel generators are useless as long as the power grid won't carry the supply. The only thing I know that can give us the necessary power is the Type T expanded battery model."
Gendo frowned slightly. Inez had built too well for him to refuse. However, it was a direct challenge to NERV's competence, even if the other organisation refused to compete anymore.
"If we'd just accepted the reactor module for Titanicus, we wouldn't be having this problem,"
Maya muttered under her breath. The NERV commander didn't hear that, but Ritsuko did. She forced a smile down.
"Unfortunately, we can't get to it until we open the storage doors, which would take some time without power."
"I never realized being so powerless could be so complicated," quipped Futsuki. He hid his own grin from Gendo, who didn't like that word choice one bit. Darkness was so convenient sometimes. One could do more in it than just brood. "NERV must be treated as under threat," Gendo commanded. "This is a perfect time for an enemy to attack. We must return to operational status as soon as possible." A static hiss swept through the command center. "At least the radios work," said Shigeru, climbing up to the command deck. "Oh, sir, we're working on getting the blast doors open. Radios are already distributed to all the work crews." "Have you made certain that we are all to remain unarmed?" "Yes, sir. The armory doors are still locked." Even more securely than before, without power to unseal the electronic locks. Shigeru sat back to his chair, pausing only briefly to exchange friendly hand slaps with Maya for jobs well done and continually underappreciated. His radio hissed again.
Confirm the Warhammer40k generate control.
He thumbed the switch.
Roger that. What's happening?
Even through a handheld radio, the sharp, echoing, invasive nature of that sound was hard to mistake. And again, even unseen, all who could hear could tell that thick metal was slowly yielding.
Are we under attack?
Shigeru shouted to those stuck up above.
I don't know, baby. Damn it, yeah. What should you do?
Another voice bumped into the line.
The elevators start talking. Where can we run?
Shrank! It's through! That technician shouted. He was just a hair's rift below panic. Even if they worked for NERV, it had never really sunk in that their lives were also a sacrifice for the safety of humanity. They weren't equipped to deal with that sort of thing.
It's on city armored hats. I did a claw or something. Oh shit!
The claw retracted, and a strong bright light shone through the hole.
Everybody, run!
The technicians began to flee.
Hello?
A girl's voice wafted through the opening.
Did someone order a nuclear reactor?
Cries of fear were replaced by cries of cheer.
Now all we need are the pilots,
Maya put in happily.
Where are they anyway? Haven't you lived in Tokyo-3 all your life?
Asuka asked Ray.
We trusted you! How can we get lost like this?
I have always passed through the main entrances. My knowledge of secondary egress are theoretical at best. I have seen the plans, but apparently there were changes in the meantime.
Not to mention it's dark, added Shinji. Something clanked by his feet.
Fine, so we have these two corridors here.
Asuka swept the beam of her flashlight through each diverging tunnel, only dimly lit by red emergency lights.
Ray?
I have nothing.
Shinji?
Doesn't really matter all that much to me. Asuka sighed. It sucked having to be the responsible one. These other children would be so lost without her. She chuckled a bit. Okay, perhaps not so apt choice of words, but...
So it's up to me again. We head right.
That's what they always said about mazes, right? The Dreadnought remained on the surface of the geofront, Gendo deeming it too much of a security risk to allow them further in. It was all too convenient. They shouldn't be so ready to help unless somehow they knew it might happen. Output sockets on the Dreadnought? Preposterous. It was too suspicious. Ritsuko stood overwatching the command center as people below heaved to insert a power plug into the Magi's tower. Flashing lights from below signaled completion.
Maya, have you finished the trace dump delete routines?
She asked aside. Her assistant had her own personal laptop open. Fortunately, Maya had bought several additional battery packs recently. She made a thumbs-up gesture. Ritsuko then looked up at the commanders, and Gendo made a slight bow.
All right. Fuse is up,
she shouted down.
Initializing Magi in 3, 2, 1.
She pointed aside to Maya.
Running anti-interference script, now!
Maya reported. Flash, 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 flash! The crew all shouted in triumph as the command center went online. Lights and fresh air returned. Everything else outside of that specific section was still dark, though. Abruptly, the place dimmed again, back to harsh red. Alarms rang out. What's wrong now? Gendo growled.
All the monitoring equipment have their own dedicated power supply. We just had no way of receiving signals until now,
said Ritsuko. She pointed up to the screen.
As we expected. Yes, Angel. We are under attack.
Gendo stood up. Get NERV to combat status immediately. Prepare the Evangelions. Do it manually if you have to. What about the Trident? Fuyutsuki asked. Send it up, said Gendo. Let's see how useless they can really be. He went off into the back conference room. Now that Magi was restored, perhaps it was time to scold a few old men. Fuyutsuki followed, if just out of curiosity.
I propose we set up Unit 1 with the title modules first, Senpai,
Maya said aside.
Then we can use its power stores to prepare the others. We can take out the EPX power packs and use it on the others. I think 8 hours of operation is still pretty good in any case.
How helpful of in his to send us the modules pre-charged. I'll try to convince the commanders. Go get it done in the meantime.
Where are the pilots? She shrugged as she walked away. Oh well, there wasn't nearly enough insanity. They'll be around when they were needed. Shinji stopped and stared behind. Something's happening, he muttered.
Don't lag behind!
Asuka shouted from the far end of the corridor. Since Shinji had said to Rei to obey, the girl followed a few steps behind the red-haired girl to offer her own comments on whatever features she found familiar along their path. His own efforts were concentrated upon the city itself, so just deferred to their intuition when wandering around the depths. He ran up to join them. I do not recognize this door, said Rei. It seems to be an environment seal. There is a manual method for opening it, though. She pointed to a radio wrench set into the wall next to the door.
All right, let's get this open, said Asuka. All together now!
She and Shinji pushed at the handle, while Rei helped by pulling down the circle's edge. When her own leadership was recognised, Asuka had no problem with working with only teamwork in mind. Anything less would seem as laziness, and Asuka refused to appear weak. They got that door open quickly enough. A cool wind rushed in. She pushed the door open to the street. Something spindly and matte black swung past. Matarael strolled over the city with ease and agility surprising for its size. The pilots looked up in awe as the many-eyed angel shot out its eyelashes like a rain of darts at something obscured by the block. Stomp, 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 stomp. Magnell's Tancred bull-rushed forward uncaring. The darts plinked off its armour, and those that punctured through seeped poison. Pity that the Dreadnought didn't have blood or LCL. Its own counter-barrage was vastly more effective, forcing Matarael to close its big eye again. While the angel was capable of rapid healing, a portion of its lower face was nothing but useless shredded meat, bulging with cancerous growth. With its many eyes, it was nonetheless blind to one side. The angel swung up with one leg, the tip sharp and gleaming, and struck down at the much smaller enemy. The Dreadnought avoided it just barely. Flash! A positron beam holed through that leg, sending jets of E-course spurting out. The angel screeched and skittered back, tearing billboards off rooftops. The Dreadnought couldn't tilt its body high enough to aim its hard-mounted positron cannon at the angel. With Matarael still using its AT field to dampen all signals around Tokyo, its defensive ability was severely reduced. It was for an all-out attack, an ambushing being. Against the Ava AT field specialization and perfect armoring proved to be both useless. Unfortunately, being matched against a purely human-made machine was the worst possible thing for it. All the anti-Ava methods it had prepared, such as acid, poison, and the anti-AT field. It screeched frustration. Worthless. Worthless. Mana Kirishima growled as she ordered a temporary retreat. They needed to reload. NERV had sent out crates of megabolter rounds, but even that wouldn't be enough. They couldn't kill the enemy. No matter, they knew all along all they had to do was keep it occupied. They'd been fighting long enough that Matarael knew it would lose out on any lull in the engagement. That time to heal couldn't compare to the enemy getting more small exploding things to hurt it with. Humans. Human tricks. The eyes all around its body blinked. Enough! The eyes all receded into its body, becoming hollow pits. Matarael began to rise up into the air. What's it doing? Asked Musashi, as the Dreadnought pulled up a fresh ammo box. Spawns of Lilith! Obstacles to Adam! A ringing tone filled the air above. Destroy all the humans! Matarael's limbs bent back into a diamond shape similar to Ramiel. A point of light, slowly becoming brighter, grew from its exact centre. It rose higher into the sky. That light flashed, bright enough to briefly outshine the setting sun. And in it inverted. A shimmering black sphere spun inside the cage of its legs, flickering and wavy as if seen through a mirage. From the pits of its squashed spheroid body, a torrent of white oblong things shot out. It hovered above the city, disgorging hundreds of the pod things. Like misshapen lumps of white potato, they dropped onto the streets and on top of smaller buildings. Matarael kept sending out more. What are those? Musashi asked further. Keita turned the Dreadnought around. Abruptly, the right lumps broke apart, gushing purplish liquid. From within the sacks emerged things with tri-sectioned beak and two back-curving legs. They walked like birds, but had no wings. They had no eyes, merely flaps on their forehead. They all screeched, hundreds of them, and it echoed through the streets. Angel spawn, muttered the Trident Chimp children numbly, having seen Evangelion Fantasy Battle the motion picture. The things dispersed. Shit! Screamed Musashi, sending the Dreadnought to a full run. It was no use, the things were just too small and too fast. We're made for heavy assault! We don't have any anti-infantry weapons! Mana punched her comm savagely. As expected, nothing but static. She pointed up. Kill it! Kill it now! The Dreadnought began running backwards until it reached the end of the main road. It slammed itself into the apartment there, hoping no one was inside. With that as support, Magno's Tancred let its rate pull itself down, pointing its hard-mounted positron cannon to the sky. Flash! The beam drilled right through Matarael. The Angel, spinning slowly in mid-air, seemed to be laughing. The pilot saw one of the Angel spawns plodding down the street. It turned to them and both stared at each other for a few moments. They saw its smooth, greyish pod upon spindly legs, with its beaks hard and deep brown. It saw 3 bright, hot shapes. Then, ow, fuck! Asuka screamed as the thing rushed at them. They pulled the door shut just as it leapt. Slam! Crunch! The door bent slightly inwards. There were scraping sounds from the other side. We need to get to the Avis! She shouted out, her eyes wide and frantic. No arguments there. They ran. Toji and Hikari were on a date when the attack happened. As the shelter warning went out, they stayed a while to make sure everyone had gone. With the residential blocks unable to attract, many were unwilling to just leave their belongings behind. Once they were at the shelters, though, the two realised that their respective little sisters weren't there. Damn it! Both said at once. Their siblings held the same stubbornness. They wouldn't have gone into the shelters just because the adults wanted to. They had entirely different ideas about where they were safe. Stupid kids! They were out in the streets when they saw a bunch of goons hauling off a large screen TV from a damaged store. Morons! Shouted Toji. This isn't that time for that. Get to the shelters! He pointed at the dark shape above the city. Ah, kid! Shouted back the thieves. They glared balefully at the two. Due to certain special reasons, crime at night was a decidedly hazardous thing to attempt in Tokyo-3. They had to get while the getting's good. One of the thugs hefted a length of heavy steel water pipe and began to approach them grimly. Matarael released its pods right then. One of the white lumps slammed into the ground, with a strange, sickening squish. It began to bulge out, portions hardening into chitin while other sections melted off. 3 more landed nearby, squelching and splattering sickly juices. The looters could only watch on dumbly, being too unwilling to put down their prizes. 4 angel spawn opened their beaks and screeched at them. Then they were just so much meat. Toji pulled a horrified Hikari away, even as different screams arose into the afternoon. One of the angel spawn looked up, flapping its sensory organs. It screeched again. The others paused from their feeding. Some of the thieves were still alive, if in bloody and blubbering pieces. The angel spawn got up and began to chase the two, being drawn instinctively to motion. They're after us! Hikari screamed. Monsters! How could things like that exist? This way! Toji shouted, then uttered out an unintelligible grunt as he forced open a manhole. Go on! He helped Hikari down, grimacing as the creatures sprinted closer, like necklace all-mouth ostriches. He fell into the hole just as the trio leapt simultaneously at him. He heaved for breath as the angel spawn above snapped at each other and futilely screeched down through the hole. Are you alright? He asked Hikari. The girl was shaking, hugging herself. Those poor people, she whispered. Yeah, it was pretty horrible. Can't say we didn't try to warn them. Toji! She shot back, her face all teary. Show some respect. Her constant lament. That time, however, they didn't deserve that. Nobody should die like that. She sobbed out. I almost can't believe it. The images were seared into her mind. So much death. So much blood. In the end, was that just what all people were? Her eyes widened. We need to do something. My sister, your sister, they're in danger. He winced. Yeah, I know. Toji got back up to his feet and offered his hand to her. Let's hurry. Putting aside her hesitations, she got up. She knew that it was time at last to live up to their responsibilities. Family trumped all.
Do you know how to get there?
They looked around. Tokyo-3's sewer line was rather cramped. The undercity tunnels were there for convenience, for easy access to gas and water lines. The walls were all just lines of thick tubing. It would be ridiculously easy to get lost, especially as it was all dark. The only light they had was from the open manhole above. Fortunately, Tokyo-3's sensibility prevailed. Near every open manhole was a small box with an electric battery torchlight. NERV was willing to throw away money just for convenience in its repair and maintenance.
That way, I think,
said Toji, lighting up the tunnel to the left. He knew the sewer line didn't exactly follow the roads above, due to vertical launches, rebuildings and whatnot. They would have to site out their location by opening up manholes along the way. Risky. Hikari nodded. As long as they were moving, disaster intensified with every minute. There were many underground shelters in Tokyo-3. Most of them were nothing more than concrete hollows sunk into the ground. The doors were metal, but never meant to take attack. NERV had just known the angels would be giant monsters. The citizens took shelter in the ones closest to their homes. Some chose to remain in their apartments and shops, in basements built for that purpose. With the power out, there was no way for them to know what was happening. The sounds of battle had stopped. Long minutes passed. One of the shelter doors opened, as a brave man decided to see if the battle was over. Almost immediately, something slammed into him, forcing open the entryway even further. A cacophony of screeches sounded from beyond the door. And then the screaming started. Matarael had landed along the main street closer to Lake Ashino. The battle raged there, devastating Tokyo-3's south side. Tokyo-3 First Municipal Junior High was directly on the opposite end of the battlefront. They hadn't received an order to evacuate, being that the Dreadnought wasn't tall enough to see beyond the buildings. Matarael's arrival, though, that they could see. The teachers had mostly left, and the remaining students felt they had a choice of going down into the school shelter or watch the battle unfold. Many believed they had plenty of time either way. Other people were trickling in through the gate to enter the school shelter. Kensico clapped his hands together again in a prayerful motion as he saw the angel rise up to disgorge hundreds of the white pods.
Shouldn't we go to the shelters now?
Asked Jun Golson, the senior from before. He'd stuck around, interested in seeing the display of robotics. The mechanics club stayed up on the roof to watch the battle through binoculars. So far it wasn't so impressive, only bright streams of bolter fire from behind buildings, the furthest sign of battle that they could see. Kensuke took a deep breath.
It's too late now,
he said sadly.
Damn it, Shinji,
he added silently. Why can't you just be wrong once in a while? Without power in the Magi, our options are severely limited.
How old are you, Golson-senpai?
I'm 17.
Old enough to enlist. You're not a member of any clubs either, are you? May I ask why?
The older student shrugged.
I suppose it all seemed childish, that's all. I didn't have any particular desire to kill or die.
Kensuke nodded.
There comes a time when each of us must decide what is truly important to us.
He looked around. There was only one entrance to the shelter, while there were two to the roof. The geek pulled the right hood of his jacket over his head and went over to his school bag. He dumped the contents out. Books, notebooks and diskettes. For all his obsessions, everyone considered Kensuke harmless. He was an average student who could be much more if he applied himself properly. He was slow to anger, quick to laugh, and easily forgiven for his childish misdeeds in trying to make school life more interesting. Before Shinji, he had few friends, only Toji staying around him for extended periods of time. He was shy in his own way, retreating into his military play. It seemed that Kensuke had found his voice, however, and was unashamed of whatever views he had or what he might do. Those around the roof watched, curious, as he tore apart his school bag with careful deliberation. He took out a bolty strip of cloth, opening that up to reveal 6 long clips of bolter rounds, painted orange all over. He pulled out his 2 bolt pistols. He ejected the banana clips with a ping noise. He pushed in live bolt ammo. He stuffed the rest of it into his jacket pockets, poking conspicuously out and weighing it down. He stood up and took another deep breath as if tired. He slung the bolt pistols back into his shoulder holsters and began to walk into the school. For no reason readily apparent there to himself, Golson felt like following him. High-pitched shrieks were starting to be heard. People began to scream and run. Kensuke turned away and went into the mechanics club room. He opened up a locker. Inside was the motion capture frame to be used in controlling the model Dreadnought, his latest prize-winning piece. He took off his jacket and put that on, titanium braces clicking to place. He found a longer coat, blood red in colour, and wore it. The effect was somewhat monastic, as the sleeves were wider near the wrists. He closed the robe-like coat with a wide belt, into which he stashed bolt clips.
The shelter has only one entrance. The roof has two.
Kensuke spoke out, more to himself than anyone. He'd gotten into the habit of explaining his thoughts, as unless it could be explained then it wouldn't be logical to him. As the first of the tech priests, he wanted to make sure. He opened the next locker over, and from it slid in armour sheaths to certain slots of the exo-frame. He brought so much junk over to the school that no one paid attention anymore to what those things might be good for.
The first one can be broken down by sheer weight of numbers. A swarm can only hinder itself when trying to squeeze through a narrow opening onto higher ground.
He exchanged his glasses for goggles. Infrared, ultraviolet, targeting, normal sight. He put a breathing mask over the lower half of his face. When he turned, the senior felt a certain chill pass over him. Even though he'd seen that transformation happen, there was still something cold and human about it.
"Get everyone to the roof,"
Kensuke commanded in a rumbling, distorted voice.
"By authority of the Tokyo-3 City Council, NERV Special Operations, and the JSSDF Emergency Act, I hereby conscript you for the defense of its citizens."
Golson blinked. "You're insane," he said, finding himself unable to breathe for a time. Those emotionless lenses. He feared being under that sight. As if he was nothing more than another specimen to be examined. Also, he half expected Kensuke to declare that he was his father at any given moment.
"I know that,"
replied Kensuke. He slumped slightly, then drew both bolters. It wasn't a threatening motion. Not yet. An ominous and yet somehow sad hiss escaped from his face mask. The senior began scratching at his hair. "I might be even more insane to obey you brats. All right, what are you going to do?"
"Don't worry about this one. I'll buy you some time."
Thus said, Kensuke slowly walked away, his feet clanking upon the concrete. Far below, Masato and Kaji were trapped in an elevator. They had completely no idea of things happening outside. Kaji had actually timed the shutdown to her entering the elevator. Screw Seal's timetable. He needed to really talk to her. She was too adept at avoiding him. Almost an hour passed in silence. She had rebuffed his early attempts at conversation, sitting cross-legged as if meditating. Masato pulled her beret over her eyes and seemed sleeping.
"It's getting hot in here, isn't it?"
He began again, weakly. There were just too many things he wanted to say. Masato was having none of that, however, entirely unwilling to break the ice.
"If you really think about it, even the heat can feel cold."
She smirked slightly.
"You just want me to take my clothes off, don't you?"
Now, you don't have to be shy."
He smirked back. Kaji still had his hands in his pockets as he sat on the elevator's floor leaning against the door. He kicked out with his legs and said,
"Sure is strange that the backup generators haven't kicked in."
"I wonder if Ritz-chan messed up an experiment." "Nothing to do but wait. This should sort itself out if we just give it time."
"Huh?"
Kaji looked genuinely surprised.
"You know, you've changed, Katsuragi. I was expecting you to be scratching at the walls by now. Or am I not as bad company as you might expect?"
"I've learned patience. Or is it I've learned how to stop worrying?"
Masato replied. She shrugged and relaxed herself against the wall, sliding down to a slouch similar to Kaji.
"Shinji couldn't take good care of me."
"Should I be jealous?"
Kaji took out a cigarette and put it to his mouth.
"He's such a popular guy, it seems."
"Don't you fucking dare light that thing up! And do you know that at this point Shinji just could walk up to nearly any woman, say, 'I want to have sex with you,' and they would?"
"Would that include you?"
"Yes,"
she answered, unabashed. Kaji let out a long sigh. Masato had changed so much over the years and yet remained the same in many ways. She was still so beautiful. She was still so impulsive.
"You do remember you're twice his age, right?"
I'm such an unsuitable person.
Masato brought her knees up to her chin.
Sometimes I wish I could be his mother, but I can't. Sometimes I wish I could be his lover, and I can't be that either. Listen to me, Kaji. I tried. Once. And this is what he said. What is it that I fear so much I'd flee for my own life? What pain hides in my soul that I would despise my own body? He refused the gift of what I don't even value.
That sounds harsh.
I saw Adam, Kaji. I saw the world die. I can't escape from that. I survived alone and the world died around me. I saw the destroyer and I can't... My life. It's like it's not real until the angels are gone. I can't forgive myself for surviving that. The horror of that. But it doesn't matter.
Her voice choked off.
So he would forgive me anyway. He's such a good boy. He's too young to die.
Kaji shut his eyes. Katsuragi-sensei had forbidden him from taking part. He escaped that fate only barely. He was so determined that he'd even planned on sneaking into the expedition. As for Masato, she put her hands to her ears as if still hearing that world-killing shriek. After all those years, somehow, just thinking of Shinji standing in front of her and staring into that glowing white terror makes it all fade away. Even Adam seemed to shrink back from his fathomless caring.
He cares too much for that soul to just break. I want to hold him and just not let go. I want to kick away the world so that it wouldn't have to bother him. I won't be able to forgive myself if he dies.
It's war, Katsuragi. Even he must make his choice. You can't protect him from that. If these children don't fight, then the world will end. It doesn't help things.
Shinji's just the type of person who thinks it's his own failure if the people around him are suffering. He deserves the chance to live like a normal boy.
But he can't.
No, we can't let him. And that's what really gets to me. It's our fault, not his. It's our sin, not his. It's our problem. We should be strong enough to deal with it on our own. We're adults, aren't we? Damn it. It's a sad world when the teenager turns out to be a lot wiser and more mature than us.
She sighed.
I rely on Shinji-kun a little too much, I think.
You know, you don't have to be alone, Masato.
Kaji.
Hate me if you want, but I don't want to see you suffer.
The spy got up to his feet and moved closer, on his knees.
Didn't I always do as you said? You wanted me gone, so I went away. Let me back in, Masato. I can't stand to see you hurting.
Can I trust you, Kaji?
That silenced him. He slid back down, putting his palms to the floor.
I'll never do anything to hurt you, Masato. I want to protect you. Everything I've done. Always for you.
He'd walked freely into a nest of vipers for her. He'd already done too many distasteful things. It was worth it, because NERV was where she was. NERV had secrets that Masato was unknowingly part of.
Everything I've done was always for your sake.
How arrogant! Just like my father,
she whispered.
You reminded me too much of him in the first place. I think that was why I clung to you. I didn't know myself, and you were always thinking you knew what was best for me. You, Ritsuko, always taking care of me. Must I always be looked after? My choice is absent. Masato just doesn't know.
We never thought that. You know, I said it once, I'll say it again. I love you.
But can I trust you?
She asked him again.
Can I count on you? It's just sad. Shinji just doesn't remind me of my father in any way. He's so much more mature than I am, but without being patronizing about it. He gives me the choices I need. He sees what I'm too scared to see. It doesn't make sense, but I like it.
That boy's up to something,
Kaji had to say.
That intelligence is just unnatural.
I know. He told me all I had to do was ask. I didn't. I can feel it. All he wants is for people to be happy. I can't deny him that. I'll protect him. No one will touch him, Kaji. This I swear. Not Gendo. Not you. Not anyone. I am his guardian. If you know me at all, then you'll know this. It would be too terrible to do alone. I trust him, Kaji. Can I trust you the same way?
Masato leaned over to place her head to his chest. Hesitantly, Kaji embraced her.
Promise me you'll never leave me.
I've had enough of running away. He held her tight. Whatever you needed, I won't. That promise was the only thing that kept Kaji from killing himself when he learned of just what part he played in helping the slaughter above. More pods rained, and upon the Dreadnought, the things attached themselves to its hull, searching out breaks in its armour. They buried in, and at once within exploded. Mana screamed as Magno's tankard, piece by piece, died.
No!
She shouted.
We're not done! Not yet! We won't retreat!
We've lost primary cooling, Kato reported. Output is down by 50%. Control is barely there. Hand-mounted positron cannon scrap, Musashi added. What should we do?
Cut this murder down to size. As long as we have a fist, we can bust its legs down one by one. Damn the counterattack. Full speed ahead!
The Dreadnought ran right through the stream of Angelet pods, paying no more mind to the clambering heaps of lumpy white things clinging to it. Stomp, 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 tearing up the road as it ran.
Die!
Screamed Mana.
In humanity's name, die!
Matarael lifted one leg and struck down. The sharp tip plunged into Magno's tankard, right through the centre. Mana felt fire surge up from her left side and into her body. She felt light. The Dreadnought was being lifted up into the air, impaled clean on that appendage. It slacked, void of the semblance of light. Explosions happened all around it. The last thing she heard was a certain joyous screech. Then, the hot flash of pain. Shinji staggered. He felt cold all over. His legs felt as if ice and stuck to the floor. He collapsed into a quivering heap.
Shinji-kun,
breathed Rei, who immediately went to his side. She reached over to touch his shoulder, but drew back at the last second. She appeared just amazed. Asuka followed at a slower pace. She was frowning.
What's wrong with him? She asked. We don't have time for this. What? You're crying?
She pulled at his arm.
Come on, Shinji. Snap out of it. Stop playing around.
She dropped contact quickly, stumbling back and falling flat on her butt. She held her hand to her chest over her pounding heart.
What was that?
She gasped. It wasn't that his flesh was cold to the touch, but it seemed as if the very heat of her own body was sucked away in an instant. Shinji looked up at her, his gaze hollow, his body spasmed out in many small ways. Wincing, he got back up to his feet. You're right. We don't have time to waste. Rei helped him steady and slung his left arm over her shoulder. Asuka narrowed her gaze.
Wait!
She got up to follow them.
Stop this! Stop it!
She said to their backs.
Stop leaving me behind!
Rei turned slightly.
What are you saying? We both recognize you as our leader, Pilot Tsuyu. I will carry Pilot Akari. You have always had the energy to go ahead and turn back if the results are not to your liking. So lead us.
Bullshit! You think empty titles like that will satisfy me? That's not a leader you're saying. That's a stick you use to poke traps with. I will not taunt Murphy or his law.
You always find the most interesting metaphors, Pilot Tsuyu.
And you always try to evade the issue.
Asuka shot back. She touched the diadem hidden under her blouse.
We're teammates, aren't we? Why don't you trust me? I can feel it. You're hiding something from me. Even now, when we really need to work together, you're still refusing me. Why, damn it? I thought I could stop hating you, but you just make it so damn easy.
Shinji remained silent, looking down, like a puppet without strings. Rei sighed softly.
Is this not good, Asuka?
She said, her voice holding feeling long absent in their conversations.
You, us, teammates, is it not comfortable? Equals in our endeavour. Why do you wish to destroy this easy friendship? What more do you ask?
If you won't give me the truth, we're not friends at all. I won't be a doll for you two to play with so you can pretend to be normal people. I won't be a tool and not yours. Stop lying to me. Stop baiting me. Stop it. I don't give you the right to hurt me this way.
What is learned cannot be unlearned. Once one has left the blissful ignorance of the womb, one may no longer return. The taste of the truth may not be to your liking.
They all heard the loud, if far-off boom.
I don't care!
Asuka cried out. Shinji slowly raised his left hand and held it palm out. Asuka, absolute trust can be painful beyond belief. Take my hand if you really want to know, but if you do, you can't turn back from this. Defiant and burning with her own righteous indignation, Asuka clasped his hand. Their fingers entwined. She let out a small grunt of pain, like icy daggers straight into the heart. Weeping, faint and so far away, pleas, curses, incoherent sounds, suddenly gone. Each cut off, and each like a piece of her own soul blackening and falling off. Mere seconds seemed like lifetimes. Eventually she was able to pull away. She gasped for breath.
That was...
She stared into Shinji's immensely pitiful eyes.
Impossible. Horrible. What was that?
My people are dying, said Shinji. Slowly he disentangled himself from Rei's support. They have out of time. He walked forward, limping to the sealed blast door to the geofront. Elsewhere they would have had to break open an air vent to pass through. He felt weak, besieged. He barely had any strength to lift his limbs. Too slow, he whispered. Time out of control. There, this door stand in our way, he snarled out between snatches of laboured breath. He pressed his right palm to the metal and left a steaming imprint when he pulled away. Shinji grinned a bit. Asuka! She blinked, startled.
What?
We live in different worlds. Close your eyes if you don't want to move into mine. We can't go back to how we were after this.
Oh, get over yourself already,
she muttered back.
Don't act all so high and mighty around me. Put up or shut up. Just trust me, damn it. I can handle whatever stupid little secrets you want to have, no matter how sick or depraved it might be.
It must be an interesting world you live in, Pilot Sawyer, Rei had to crip. Shinji slapped his palms to the metal and shuddered. Dying. Enough! He shouted. We need to get through! And he pushed through. His arms sank into the metal, becoming as liquid around him. It began to hollow out around him, glowing red-hot, high-strength metal melting and flowing in rivulets as he just walked through. His skin shone faintly. Droplets falling upon him slid down his body like harmless rain. He stepped into the next room. It was dark. He kept walking, still limping slightly. The next sealed door over just gave way at his approach, again just on its own, hollowing out as if drilled through, dripping down in streams of boiling metal. Rapidly, the metal cooled and its molten light faded. The girl pilots likewise stepped through the cavity, following Shinji. They reached him in front of a similar sealed door, 4 broken barriers into the corridor. This one had a blinking red light over it. There was power at the other side. He turned and smiled weakly at Asuka. And now you know, he mumbled, his face slack and his gaze unfocused. He fell, darkness claiming his consciousness. The very last dregs of his strength failed, and his people was still dying. Please, he begged anyone, anything. Save them.
What are you?
He heard a far-off female voice ask, one so familiar yet his mind so numb, so unable to attach a name to it. I don't know, he whispered. He closed his eyes and surrendered fully to the failings of his mortal flesh. Tokyo-3 had its own police force. NERV Section 2 was a highly respected intelligence service, known for its efficiency and ruthlessness. With communications cut, both had to rely on their own individual judgments as to how they could best help save the city. Both ended up assisting civilians to the shelter. Both died in droves. They were issued pop guns in comparison to what was needed to take down the age-spawn horrors scattered all around the city. They tried what they could to give the people time to flee, to lock their doors and pray for a miracle. Stay indoors! Lucky doors! Agent Jiro yelled into the car's amplifier as the black Ford sedan spun through the city streets. Don't come out! Stay where you are! Shitstorm, muttered Agent Kentaro, seeing panicking citizens running past the far intersection. A group of black-suited Section 2 and blue-clad Tokyo-3 police paused to pump pistol rounds into the pursuing pack of pod creatures. Shrieks of pain met their efforts, but the beasts kept on. He gunned the engine for all it was worth and burned through the street. The car swerved wildly, nearly ploughing into the people briefly caught in numb surprise. Agent Jiro pulled on his half of the dashboard, revealing a trigger mechanism behind the glove compartment. A portion of the car's hood blew open, revealing a hard-mounted large-caliber cannon. The rebuilt Ford was an electric car after all. The engine was at the back. There was plenty of space for accessories up front. Dugga dugga dugga! Short controlled bursts just blew apart the approaching pack of angel spawn. In that case, hard-mounted heavy bolter. Get these people to safety! Shouted Agent Jiro to the few authorities that remained. What safety? A policeman shouted back. He laughed hysterically. The things are everywhere! Where are the Evangelions? Fucking useless brats! He yelped as a spread of heavy bolter rounds slapped the ground right in front of his feet. Shut up! The agent replied grimly. You don't know what you're saying. They'll be here. They have their own problems. Just need to hold on until they can arrive. But where will we go? One of the people asked, dressed in nothing but his shirt and shorts. Mothers embraced their children, and everyone was huddling into one nervous mass. There were still shrieks in the distance. Get these people to some place with a high roof, commanded Agent Kentaro. He reached around to the back seats and grabbed several loose bolt pistols. Here, these should be useful. He tossed them out, carelessly. Those things were supposed to be robust anyway. Go! Section 2, spread out to find more survivors. The shelter should remain closed. Lead them to outer edges of the town. What about the angel? Asked one of the operatives, his trademark black sunglasses cracked and missing its left ear lens. The eye behind the open frame was bloodshot and weary. That's not our problem. Go. Save as many people as you can. That's what Shinji Ikari wants. We've got to hold on until we can bring out the Ava. Ikari! Move, damn you! And believe, we're still alive. We have time. Save as many people as you can. Let him worry about the fate of the world. The black car reversed and swerved off in search of other separate groups. Those people there stood numbly around, then seemed to wake up suddenly as they heard the distinctive screeches of awakening pods. They ran. Shinji Ikari, please, protect us. Save us. They prayed for his sudden and miraculous appearance. People dropped whatever they were carrying and headed off towards the junior high school, being the furthest shelter from the scene. As their prey moved, so did the angel spawn. Shriekers, they would be called, as they always announced their presence. They're here! Screamed the woman, as the loud screeches of shriekers sighting prey sounded through the back streets. The crowd became one mindless, stampeding mob. Unfortunates were crushed underfoot. They poured through the school gates, the angel spawned close behind. A few leapt, for they had raptor-like legs and claws. Daka! Daka! They exploded in midair, showering the rushing rabble with purplish blood and chunks of grey-white meat. Students urged them further in. Don't stop. Don't look back. Head to the roof. The stream of people parted before a red figure standing motionless in the ray. Even in their frenzied state, they knew it was something to avoid. The hooded figure walked forward in deliberate slowness. Like they knew, this was a person who had set aside all fear and embraced only cold, deadly purpose. Zealotry takes many forms, but the capacity for murder was always the same. He lifted a large pistol, a bolt pistol, and everyone in the direction of its barrel just dived away. Daka! Another angel spawn exploded into a shower of contra-evolutionary guts. As the flow of people slowed, he was left there facing a bunched-up, screeching pack of 13 pod creatures. Time to switch to full auto. Daka, 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 daka. Ping! The other bolt pistol. Daka, 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 daka. Ping! One remained. It screeched angrily, unwilling to move. Kensuke put down his guns, hooking one to his belt, and with that free hand took out a spare clip. The angel spawn charged. Watch out! Yelled someone. Click. He took one step to the side like a matador and held out the bolt pistol. He pulled at the trigger and Daka! Right into the creature's open maw. It slid to the ground, stopping at just an inch before his feet. Once upon a time he would have been glad for the chance to lose his life, his meaningless flesh for glory. Now, however, for he had seen what was still waiting in humanity's service, Kensico refused to die. There were still too many things that had to be done. Such little things as an angel attack weren't enough to convince him to give up on his own flawed existence. Strange to find religion in the realm of logic. The first of the tech priests of Tokyo-3 turned around, and a strong wind sent his blood-red robe flapping like a cape.
"What are you standing around for?"
he asked.
"Get to the roof!"
What the fuck? One of the students who had gone home early asked along the way. When did Kensuke turn into a badass? Distant screeches getting louder and louder. Kensuke had no intention of holding ground like some martyr hero. As soon as the other people were up on the higher floors, he began to give ground and let the beasts enter the school. As he expected, they searched around randomly in the lower floors before one by one finding their way up the stairwells. Lacking eyes and a good neck, the things had only the vaguest idea of up.
"Such incompetent contrivance,"
Kensuke murmured. Man, even in all his frailty, at least he had the capacity to see beyond his limited being and create things utterly new. Might of machines must take over where fallible flesh failed, but such things were an insult to both the precise beauty of the machine spirit and the soft harmony of the living container. Daka! Damn it, Shinji, get off your ass and kill that thing. A manhole cover slowly slid open. Toji had to move the cover away, as it was too heavy to just tilt and peek through. He couldn't do that and hold onto the rungs at the same time. He took off his jacket and experimentally waved it up into the open a few times. Then hesitantly, he poked his head through.
Do you see anything?
Hikari asked, standing directly below.
Nothing. This is Mitsuki Street. I could see Hinano's manga pack from here. We'll close.
Ah! Hard beaks scraped against concrete. He'd let go just in time to keep his own head from being shorn off his shoulders. He fell to the sewer floor with a loud thump. Ah! He groaned. He pushed himself back up, then stopped. In reaching down, his hand had found something soft and squishy behind him.
Oh, I'm dead,
he added.
Toji, get off me!
He spun around, and in landing actually managed to slide into a kneel. Sorry! He shouted out desperately. He put his forehead to the ground. Hikari adjusted her jacket and huffed.
It's fine. It was just an accident.
It wasn't as if she wouldn't be letting him do that someday. And she shook her head quickly. It wasn't the time to be thinking of things like that. She looked up at the open manhole and the amber light beyond it. She heard even more screeches and distant screams.
These things! Toji, can we just let ourselves be stuck here like this?
He sighed and slapped his thighs. He seemed to be in serious thought for a few short moments.
Hey, Hikari, don't give up yet.
He shone his flashlight on her face.
You know, I like you, right? I really like you, Hikari.
Her eyes widened and she blushed.
Toji!
She breathed.
At such a time!
Stuck in a sewer line and with monsters above their heads was not a good place for such a confession. Unless...
No! If you're thinking of doing something stupidly heroic, then I forbid it!
He chuckled.
You know what I like most about you? Sure, you're pretty and nice and all that junk.
Right, that junk.
Toji pulled at his own hair in frustration.
Ah! Well, you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I should hope so,
she replied, pretending to look miffed.
Just what is it you want to say?
I like you, Hikari,
he said, in a firm voice that sent her blushing again. It was a good thing the light was away from her face. She clenched her fists.
People think you're bossy and you nag and you're always asking hard questions. But I like you anyway.
He got up and walked over to her. He held out his hand for her to take.
But what I like most about you is that you never ask the questions that don't need answering. You don't take the trust we're not ready to give. Thank you for that.
She stood up to face him.
Why are you saying this now?
He put a finger to her lips. He too blushed. She was so tender and trusting.
You can ask, but telling others, that's not what you're about, are you? Come on,
Let's go save these kids. He grinned and pulled at her. They ran down a tunnel. Eventually they stopped before a rusted metal door marked Danger, High Voltage. Toji began to wrench it open.
What are you doing?
She cried.
That's dangerous.
Just watch, he replied somberly. It was such a rare mood for him. Hikari could only follow him into a smaller tunnel, wondering about it all. At the end of that tunnel was a thick door. Toji flipped open the panel and spoke into a suspiciously new device among the rusted and wet pipes. From the Emperor's mouth to my ears. Suzuhara. Toji. The door slid open.
Hey!
Hikari had to point out.
Shouldn't the power be out?
That's right. This place is completely separate from Tokyo-3 power grid. Beyond was a wide room, metal-walled room. There was a bed, used recently it seemed, dressers and a functional kitchen. A far wall was dominated by a big, complicated-looking bank of monitors and computers. There was another door facing the one they were coming out of, and at a right angle away was an elevator opening. Toji bowed slightly and let Hikari enter first.
What is this place?
She asked. Depending on who you ask, it's a safe house, a lair, a bunker. But mostly it's a place that doesn't exist. We can be sure nobody's watching us here. He didn't notice her staring wide-eyed at the bed. But we can't stay long. I just need to pick up some stuff. He went over to the elevator and pushed a green button on the intercom. Oi, Patton-san, you awake? Things are getting nasty out here. A growling voice issued forth. Suzuhara, is that you? Blam! Click, click, blam! Click, click. Don't come up. The thing's broke into the store. I'm on the second floor. Ugh! If I just had the 50 caliber. Oh, a 70 caliber, eh? He grinned. The old man could handle himself. Look, I'm just here to pick up some stuff. Tell Kensico sorry if I break anything. He turned around. Class rep, could you open up those cabinets over there? What? You brought the girl? Suzuhara, you little idiot! Don't head back out and get... Large polished steel cabinets lined up along a wall. One by one she opened them. The first seemed to be sheer black fetishware, skulls and claws. Hikari didn't know what to think of that. The next, weapons. Large, ugly, deadly-looking blades. Guns. Blades. Is that a chainsaw? A sword? The next, even more weapons and boxes of ammunition. The last were different articles of assorted armour clothing.
What is all this?
Hikari had to ask. You remember when we talked about Shinji protecting the city, and we protecting Shinji? Under the sun, on a grassy hill, those idyllic days seemed so far away. We said we'd fight for him in every city, in every way we knew how. He wasn't the only one who wanted to protect others. He gestured around. Shinji, Ibuki, Ayanami, and even Kensuke, they built this place, so that when the worst happens, we wouldn't be lost as to what to do.
This is insane,
she whispered.
We shouldn't have to deal with all this.
That's true. I prefer to think of it as crazy prepared, but really, when shit happens, aren't you glad we had this anyway? Toji began to put on a dull green flak vest and inserted hard ceramic plates into specific slots. He put on a green helmet with circuits inlaid into it. He flipped down a transparent pane LCD display over his left eye. Then from the other cabinet he took out a large rifle with an enlarged muzzle. It looked similar to a gangster-era Thompson submachine gun, only thicker and with a large, strange, double-headed eagle marking slapped on its side. With practiced ease he checked the chamber for a bolt round. He made sure the safety was off. He took a deep breath and stood up straight. It should be comical, his clothes only just slightly oversized. But Hikari felt the breath catch in her throat.
Stormtrooper Suzuhara,
she whispered. He grinned. He thumped his chest. Body armor like this would only slow you down, though. Hikari, I want you to be able to one array. Don't worry so much. He reached into the cabinet and took out what looked like a red long coat. Armoured coat using flexible strips of ceramic-infused polymer. At least that's how Kensuke explains it. From your wrists to your ankles. Full body protection without the rate. Not like this thing. Just on the chest. Kinda hard to breathe, too. So please, Hikari, put this on and stay here. Don't worry. I'll get to us sisters.
Toji!
He snapped to attention. There was something about being in a uniform that just brought to mind the quick after-school boot camp Mr. Pat and Sakura had them go through daily for weeks on end.
What?
Did Shinji know this would happen? Could he have stopped it?
To think that it might have been allowed to happen. Such foresight. Incredible. Intimidating. Never had she any inkling about all of this. There's Shinji-kun?
It can't be.
Do you think that if he could have, he would have hesitated? Even Shinji has his own limits, and at that point we need to do what we can.
He slung the strap of his bolt rifle over his shoulders and put on an ammo belt.
So what if we're just kids too? I can't just cower when people die. If I could do something, then I'll do it. It's my own choice, and that's the kind of thing Shinji allows me to make.
Hikari hugged him. It didn't feel so well, what with the bulk of the flak jacket in a way. But it was enough.
Don't be in such a hurry to die, Toji.
Let me fight so you won't die,
he whispered into her hair.
I can't stand just the thought of it.
She grinned into the green of his flak armour.
Give me that damn cold-nosed bolt pistols. I won't let you go out there alone, Toji. I know how you think.
Hikari, didn't you hear what I just said? I don't want you to die.
I don't want you to throw your life away either. As long as I'm there for you to protect, you're not going to think of any stupid heroics. I won't let you.
Hikari looked up, her skull hair tie sharing the grin in her face.
Besides, you're not the only one that wants to kill these things.
Those poor people. Here was the choice. Here was the means. She wouldn't shrink from her responsibilities. This was her city too.
My God, woman, you're bipolar,
Toji laughed.
I like that too.
Damn, she looks really good in uniform too. Her hair's shorter than Kirishima, so it works out well. Hikari stuck 2 bolt pistols into her belt. Then after a moment's hesitation, she reached for the mini chainsword. She gave it a few test swings. Battery powered and made of lightweight fiberglass and composites. The blades were hardened alloy.
Vroom, vroom.
She chuckled darkly. Wow. So this is what seeing your soulmate feels like. Another bloated white corpse tumbled down the stairwell.
The boulders are confusing them,
said Kensuke, more to himself than to reassure the others with him.
They see through heat and there's something fast and hot heading towards them, so they open their mouths every damn time.
He began to cackle madly.
He's crazy,
one of the girls whispered.
Yeah, but he's the one with the gun,
her friend said back. He stopped abruptly and turned to the gathered throng.
Is everybody here?
He then pushed his face mask up again to amplify his voice.
Everybody get away from the doors! Get those planks for those handles!
He commanded in that dark and yet strangely very compelling tone.
Yes, my lord,
someone found himself saying. He grinned in the sheer irony of it as he worked to seal off the doors. They'd piled up chairs on the stairs below to further make it more difficult to climb.
Why are we here?
One of the older men asked. He had the drooping looks of a salaryman.
What do we do? What's wrong with the shelter?
The shelter's a dead end, upperclassman Golson explained.
If they get through the doors, you're all just dead. At least here we can hope for helicopter recovery.
That makes sense,
an unidentifiable woman put in.
But when?
We don't know.
That's not good, another man complained.
We're out in the open like this. We're helpless. That's just useless if we don't even know if we're going to get rescued.
The crowd's mood began to turn ugly. Children were crying.
We're trapped here anyway,
someone shouted out, his tone panicking.
Daka!
Kensuke glared at them with a glowing green goggled glance.
If you want to just lie down and die, I won't stop you. But at least here you have a chance to fight for your life. If you don't see any more hope, then you're free to just jump off.
Stop being so pretentious,
a tall, thin man shouted. He waved his fist up in the air.
You don't have the right to order us around. You're just a kid. Just because you have a gun doesn't make you any better.
I have a gun and armour. What's the source of your confidence?
Kensuke replied. He ignored the barely repressed chuckles from some of his friends.
Darth Vader, someone said. He threw his bolt pistol at the man's feet.
There are still 6 rounds in that bolt gun. Go and kill some angel spawn if you feel like being a man.
Don't patronise me!
Then stop being an idiot. Live or die. It's your choice and I don't care.
Say it! He heard from behind. He sighed.
I find your lack of faith disturbing,
Kensico growled. He moved through the group and up to the school's water tank. He pushed the volume on his voice amplifier further.
Listen up! That barricade won't hold, but at least the fiends can only get through a few at a time. We have better freedom of movement here. There's only one thing you have to do, and that's live! We need to hang on until NERV can launch the Avers. They're surely being put to siege like we are.
But what can we do? We don't have any weapons! Kensico pulled down his face mask and grinned. He brought out what looked like a small remote control. He pushed the button. The water tank behind him exploded. Water gushed out in frightful torrents. Everyone else drew back from the flood.
He's insane!
Someone said again. Thump. Thump. Crack. Long metal boxes were brought out, carried by the flow. One broke apart to reveal several stubby rifles with an enlarged muzzle. Balking for a bit, the students who had most contact with Kensico then approached to open up the other boxes. Inside were bolt pistols, entire heaps of ammo, painted orange, live ammo. Under cover of darkness, Kensico and company had stashed those where no one would ever bother to look. Digging a storage pit seemed too cliché back then.
Bolt pistols. Firing 17.5mm bolt round, each a dry-object projectile that explodes when inside the enemy. Bolt rifles. Firing the same ammunition but at greater range with a larger round capacity. Shinji Kaoru fights for us, and the great titan of our age, the Principio Aterna. Never let it be said that it leaves us helpless or relying too much on him. You're adults. Solve your own damn problems. We're teenagers. The world will be ours. We can't die here. Not yet. Take these weapons and give praise to their machine spirits. They will not fail you. Keep your faith. Fight and live. In his name, live!
A loud cheer rang out, overshadowing the horrendous screeches of the angel spawn. Kensico nodded. Yep, guns do make everything better.
I'm scared,
sobbed the little boy.
Back up, Hugo-chan,
said Nozomi. She pinched her friend's cheeks.
We're the Tokyo-3 chapter of the boys. What is this fear you speak of? But it's really scary out there,
Sugo replied, still teary.
Can't you see that? Well, it's out there. As long as we're here, we're okay.
The boys' hut was a 2-story house slated for demolition. It was a ridiculously easy purchase. It was in a safe but underutilised region of the city, just behind the side commercial blocks and a NERV armory building. The back of the house led to a windowless alley, with many different entrances and exits. Outside it still looked decrepit, with an overgrown yard fenced in by sheets of construction siding. The brick walls, however, were reinforced with polycarbonate film on the outside and steel rods on the inside. Sheets of steel half an inch thick were sandwiched into the wooden walls. The roof was tile on the outside, crisscrossed with supporting metal struts on the inside. The outer door was heavy wood. The basement was more like a bunker, the door sealing airtight. It also opened out into a prepared tunnel to the sewer line as emergency exit. Shinji seemed to have foolproofed the shelter. Unfortunately, he could never make it children-proof.
Ah!
One of the smaller boys cried.
I want my cousin!
Soon the whole lot of them, none older than 12, were crying too.
I want to go home!
All Shinji had in mind for them was fun and games, even if sometimes useful beyond appearances. He wanted them to be safe. He made sure they would be safe. They believed in his benevolence. That was the problem. Instead of heading home, the Gretts remained behind. This forced parents and relatives to look for them, and many unfortunately met their end upon Pod Shrieker Beaks. Nozomi tried to get them to shush.
Quiet down! You want them to hear us?
She was at an utter loss on how to deal with it. It was scary. Those were monstrous shrieks, heard even through thick concrete. The ground shook as like an earthquake from the Dreadnought stomping. Everyone could recognise the sound of gunfire. Their own imaginations fueled tears worse than what they could see.
I want my mommy,
A child blubbered further. She turned to Marie, the pale and cunning Suzuhara sibling. Both little girls had a lot in common, forced by circumstances to be more thoughtful and responsible over their years, having refused such obvious bad examples by older siblings.
What is your book saying to do right now?
Mari Suzuhara was not a particularly strong person. However, her ability to remember, and by virtue of sheer volume of her voice, it was inevitable they'd have her as the lawkeeper, or in the parlance, Morkana the Way. She coughed.
Ah! You the Grinch! Chapter 5!
Deep breath.
So you're stuck in with the boys. So there's this big scrap happening and all those biggers are throwing their weight around. What's he gonna do? You can take a stick or a rock to add to the fight. You can try and gnaw at their ankles. You can use your puny little weight to play. You can do that and it won't help nobody. You're the Grets. You take your little heads and stick them inside your little hidey holes. The boys are made for fighting and winning. The Grets are made for knowing and seeing. Yours how the boys can go back for another one. You build what they need to bring the white and proper back to the world. You sees the squids and knows what they do. And then someday, you're gonna be the boys on your own. Be smart, Gretches. That's how you win against the bigger. Stay away from feet that might stump you. The power of the boys is all together in the raw. You ain't there to waste your tears and your sweat and your blood. You're small and hard to follow. Use that. Don't fight like the boys 'cause you ain't them. Oh, sneaky like, there's no shame in that. You're the Gretchen. You better hide. Don't come out until the boys are done. Then use it to say, if we won, we won. If we mucked about them, we go back for another one. We sees it. We testifies it. We've never beaten in battles.
The children silenced.
I'm worried,
Said Aki, Nozomi's other best friend.
and my parents has got to be worried about me. What's happening out there?
Nozomi sighed. She was small, but she was Gorkana, the de facto active leader of the Gretchen.
Okay, I'm gonna go have a look-see. Remember, stay here. Nobody follows.
She went over to a small cubbyhole in the wall and opened it up. The air seal hissed open. There was a dumbwaiter system there, like a small elevator. She had to sit to fit. Only children could use it. Shinji had foreseen them being chased by those who wanted to use them as a pressure hold upon their parents and siblings. Nozomi rose to the first floor behind a cupboard. She slowly pushed open the panels. Ah! She screamed. Damn it, I know it's around here somewhere, Toji swore. He pressed his back to a wall and peered out the corner. Look, there's a 24-hour convenience store. There's the playground. There's the armory building. We've been here before. Hikari took a look as well, crouching to minimize her own notice. The street was bare of people and shriekers. There were corpses aplenty, though, of both men and angel spawn.
I don't see the children's little hideout, though. That's impossible. How can we lose a building just like that?
Could someone have moved it?
What, in one day, and leave no trace of it behind? I don't even remember where exactly it used to be.
Toji paused. He stared down at Hikari. That's strange. You forgetting something like that? I could probably get lost even in this city, but you? Where your own sister spends her time? That's impossible too. Whatever reply she was about to make was cut off by the sound of gunfire. They turned around and saw 8 angel spawns rushing across the street. Strangely, it seemed as if they were running from something, instead of their normal seek and destroy behaviour. The 2 junior students looked into each other's eyes and nodded. Every pod creature dead was at least one more human life saved or avenged. They moved out of cover and fired into the shrieking right mass. Toji pulled space bursts out of his bolt auto rifle, as each drum held only 27 rounds, and the kick was comparable to a full-size bolter. 3 of the creatures died instantly, and the rest screeched their displeasure. They saw the 2, and in their dim, feral minds calculated their pack was more numerous. Instincts drove them to attack. Daka! The 2 let loose with their weapons on full auto. Hastily they reloaded. The angel spawn didn't even manage to get halfway across the street. Shit and goddamn, muttered one of the JSSDF's Marines as they reached the scene.
These things got owned hard.
What happened here? The sergeant asked aloud. He hefted his assault rifle and with some hesitation kicked at a blown-apart pod creature corpse.
I know it takes massive damage to take down these things, but damn, that's fast. What could have done this? No, who could have done this?
We should ask them, maybe, another said offhand. He pointed over to across the street, at the two teens still kneeling in a wary position, their weapons lowered slightly, but at the ready. He waved out, motioning they were friendly. Toji waved back, and rarely they met in the middle of the street.
Hey, you're just kids,
another Marine spat out.
Thank you, Marino. We really needed you to point out the obvious,
snarked the sergeant. He turned back to the two.
Look, not that I don't appreciate you helping out, but it's dangerous out here. Why aren't you in a shelter? And where do you get those wonderful toys?
Takahashi.
Shut it.
Again to the students.
I'm Sergeant De Leon, JSSDF. There's Katagiri, Ota, Moreno, and Takahashi over there.
It was then the teens noticed that his skin was indeed a darker shade, and his eyes had the fold missing from certain Asiatic eyelids.
Who are you? Suzuhara Toji.
Hiraki Akari.
Oh!
exclaimed Corporal Takahashi.
Stormtrooper Suzuhara. So that is a bolter you have there. Bolt auto rifle.
Toji patted the ammo drum.
A true bolter's a some machine pistol that would break your wrists if you are not careful. We get range and handling from a rifle stock, but it's also a lot heavier and less convenient.
Hikari had already holstered her weapon, the much easier to handle bolt pistol, and stared up at the soldiers.
You're from the Kirishima Corps, aren't you?
The sergeant laughed.
All we have is one platoon.
He looked around. The angel-spawn screeches weren't nearly as widespread as before. It was getting pretty dark, though.
I'm going to assume you're not the only ones with bolters around here, since we've been seeing dropped hostiles like that all over. Okay, so even if you can take care of yourselves, you really shouldn't be here. We're looking for our sisters, replied Toji. We know they're not in a shelter. They're hiding out somewhere. They have to be safe. It's a really well-protected place. Better than the shelter? I don't know, but she just has to be safe.
The JSSDF Marines nodded. It'd be too crass to point out she might already be dead. Besides, kids, they can get into the oddest and most cramped of places.
All right, we're out looking for survivors anyway. Might as well keep an eye out for them too.
A scream.
Kadama!
shouted Hikari, recognizing that instantly.
Where?
They turned to see an angel spawn suddenly screech and leapt to the kitchen window. The makeshift fence had just collapsed. Behind it was a decrepit old building. They just hadn't noticed. Somehow hidden by the fence? It snapped its beak, letting out clicking sounds, and bashed against the glass. Incredibly, it held, only a thin crack showing up on the surface. That beast was subjected to sheer overkill, dying without even knowing that it was attacked.
That's it!
Toji shouted. That house with the cracked blue paint and a red door. Why, it looks really conspicuous. Why didn't he notice that before?
Mary! Kodama!
A little girl's face showed up on the window pane.
Back at Toji!
She shouted back, happy.
Damn that kid, he muttered. She's never going to break out of that habit.
He muttered as he ran. He was smiling, though, even as the door opened.
Oh, thanks, Shinji,
Hikari whispered as she followed.
Are you all right?
There were 15 children hiding inside the house. The sergeant had to admit, at seeing the inside, better than a shelter.
Hop to! Let's set up a perimeter, he said to his unit. Then to Nozomi. We're going to send the people we find here. Is that all right?
The book says, the strong should protect the weak. This house is strong. It's all okay.
Oh.
He grinned. What nice kids.
Sergeant. Yes, Suzuhara. If you send someone to Neon Star's gun selling, I think you can get your hands on some more bolt rifles. The gunsmith there's one of the few actually licensed to make these things and bolt ammo. He's kind of stuck on the second floor, though.
He chuckled a bit at the irony. All those guns on display are useless anyway. Unloaded and all. Tell him I sent you and he should give up a few. He might gripe a lot about it, though. Should I be disturbed about how a kid like you is mixed up in all of this? He grinned. Hey, welcome to Tokyo-3.
Damn it, Baka Shinji, wake up! Wake up! We don't have time to race, remember? Wake up!
His cheeks reddened, but other eyes showed no sign of recovering. His body was cold, his face ashen. Were it not for a weak pulse and the occasional rise and fall of his chest, Asuka could believe him dead. She grimaced and stepped back, letting his head fall back onto Rei's lap.
Damn it! What's wrong with you?
She touched the pendant under her shirt again.
What are you?
Human, Rei responded with nary a beat.
You're kidding.
Asuka turned and stared at her with a sardonic glare.
I'm not blind. I saw that. No human could do that. This is what you were hiding from me. Shinji, he's an angel, isn't he?
No, Pilot Soyu. Shinji-kun is actually more human than you or me. Tests prove this.
You don't really expect me to believe that, do you?
Rei sighed.
How shall I explain?
She stroked his forehead. Asuka couldn't help but notice how full of affection that gesture was.
Ikari Shinji is the only one of us who was born of man and woman. You were born of your mother, from the chosen genetic material of some of the finest examples of the male in the species.
The red-haired girl nodded. Since she was small, it had always been drilled into her how special she was. Her father, her mother's first husband, tried to do his duties. There was just an impossibility of true affection there, though. Her entire existence was a slap to his pride, as it was to many other children. Her defence against being teased for lacking a human sire was that same specialness. She had to be superior to their random genetic drift.
I have never known a mother or father. You were born to pilot the Eva, Soyu. I was made to pilot the Eva. If you must call someone an abomination of the enemy, let it be me. For I was made of human and angel DNA, crafted, grown, honed into my duty. Much as my Unit 0 was a prototype, so was I. As much as my Evangelion was insignificant, so was I.
Asuka blinked. Rei was clearly sad. It was the furthest hint of emotion she'd ever seen from the other girl. She just knew she was supposed to sympathise, but she couldn't feel it. It reinforced her feelings of superiority, and she was also ashamed of that. In the end, she chose a polite,
I'm sorry.
You hold the highest sync ratio, Pilot Soyu. You were born on December 3rd, 2001. Your mother... Again, how shall I say?
She sighed again.
The Evangelion Unit 2 was made just for you. At the same time, you were made for Unit 2.
The girl narrowed her gaze.
What are you implying?
You also have angel DNA spliced into you. It is but a tiny portion of your overall DNA code, but it allows you easier control over your Eva. It would have been a simple task during the fertilization process.
Asuka's hand flashed up towards Rei's face, but the girl held back, even as the other pilot didn't flinch. She grit her teeth and clasped her hands to her chest. She took deep breaths and glared. She was lost in the many different things to say.
Ikari, Soyu, Akagi, these are the women who made the Evangelion. Ikari, you made me so that normal humans wouldn't have to suffer. I was made as a vessel for that suffering. I was a failure in that regard. You were given only the slightest boost, and in that you are a better result.
You're lying,
she hissed.
I'm not a freak. My mother would never do that.
Rei tilted her head to the side.
Would she not?
Mama. That doll. Asuka forced back her tears. Yes, she would. Her mother was just that brilliant. She was also that much obsessed with the Eva. Even when Akari had died, Kyoko Zeppelin Soryu dared to take the test herself. Either it was her own ego seeking to prove its superiority, or that she disdained anyone's interference in her own work. She let nothing stop her. Only Kyoko could command Kyoko. Her mother hanging there. Her empty human shell.
It can't be.
It had the ring of truth to it, though. NERV had never been a very moral organisation. Humanity as a whole seemed their plaything. Their doll.
You have to be lying!
It is a simple matter of asking Dr. Akagi. She should know of it.
Ray shrugged very slightly.
In any case, it doesn't matter. You are still human by all definitions, Pilot Tsuyu. You may have progeny with other humans. Your genes may or may not be passed on. You have nothing to be ashamed of.
And you?
My failure lies not in my lackluster synchronization. Though my Evangelion is that less agile, this vessel is made to endure. Crude as my Eva may be, but a low sync ratio means it may also take greater punishment. This flesh of mine lives, fights, but is in the end meaningless. They hoped for an evolutionary leap.
She huffed.
I am sterile.
Asuka looked up.
What?
Was that part of their plan? What could they have been thinking of? Only then did it filter into her mind. Wait, made by you, Ikari?
I am the first and will be the last of my kind.
I apologise ahead of time, Asuka, but I will have Nagisa's head on my pointy stick.
So that's your secret?
Asuka replied softly, looking down. She felt... What should she be feeling? She wanted to know. She wanted all the ugly truths. And she had it at last. Should she hate them? She only felt empty.
What about Shinji?
Shinji Ikari was born of man and woman, normal humans, or as normal psychologically as they can be. Mentally, I wouldn't be able to say. I can sense angels, Pilot Tsuyu, and even you. Earlier today, that feeling you had, that was the AT field. You have for so long simply ignored such feelings. I can, and you can, because our own souls resonate to that terrible essence. Shinji-kun, however...
It shouldn't be possible. That shouldn't be possible.
Her face twitched.
It doesn't make sense.
Par for the course, actually. Goddamn Tokyo-3. Fucking weird magnet Japan. She groaned out.
Are you sure? If his mother made you, then couldn't she have messed with him a little bit?
Shinji Ikari was born on June 6, 2001. This implies he was conceived in the middle of last year, and his second impact on September 13, 2000.
The idea that he was seeded on the very moment of impact and the death of billions discomforted her.
You must also discard the idea of angels attacking if you must think that way. It can only be reasonable if second impact could somehow be predicted ahead of time. You and I, however, are the fruit of that frightening realization. That man was not even close to being a master of his own world.
And that is his secret.
Asuka sat down, leaning against the bulkhead door.
It's a lot to take in all at once.
She let out another small groan.
I think I understand. If the others knew about this, that bastard, it can end well for Shinji. I wouldn't go so far as to say they'll cut him open to see what makes him tick. But Gendo would keep him away from the Eva, wouldn't he?
Shinji-kun cares for you deeply, Pilot Tsuyu. He and I treasure this friendship we have. Together we are the defenders of humanity. This is why we thought it best you didn't know. Can he still be your friend after this? Do you despise me now?
I hated you two anyway. I cherish you anyway. No, not really. This doesn't really change anything.
Human.
Just human.
If you are pondering what I'm pondering, Tsuyu, then let me say, yes, it is possible to emulate to some extent what Pilot Ikari is capable of. It does seem to require some measure of insanity, though.
She looked away.
I know of only one other person who is capable of mastering an AT field without being an angel.
Asuka's eyes widened. Could it be?
And it is not Nagisa.
Asuka narrowed her gaze.
Were you spying on me?
Are you a princess or an Ava pilot? Surely you understand. This is Tokyo-3. Did you really hope for privacy?
I guess not.
She shrugged again.
How are you going to hide this, though? You can't keep it secret forever. That damage is done. You can't expect them not to investigate.
Ray let a long pause drift by.
What damage?
She asked. Finally.
Oh, come on, the whole door melting thing! It reminded me of the tunneling angel, actually. Ritsuko would recognise that.
She sent the beam of her flashlight over to the broken doors. Asuka ran over, unwilling to believe her eyes. She ran her hand over the metal and tapped at it. There was a solid return.
No way!
She breathed. The doors were as before, not even a scratch.
Did we just imagine it?
No, because we're here and we were over there.
She turned back and shone her light upon Shinji, lying there motionless like a corpse. Asuka's expression held a certain realization. Kaoru had given to her the greater good. Shinji had nothing to offer her except her own power. She felt a certain hunger well up in her being.
What is he?
She asked again. I know what an angel is, and he is not, Ray replied evenly. He's either man or a god. There is nothing in between. The last door opened slowly, grinding. Beyond was brightly lit. Asuka winced at the change in light level.
Oh, there you are,
Ritsuko said.
Shinji-kun!
Gasped Maya.
What happened to him?
He was injured, Ray responded simply. Ritsuko just groaned. There'd be no end to the troubles, just as they got the magie almost functioning again.
Looks like we have no choice but to mobilize with you girls. Let's get him to the infirmary.
It had gone on long enough that the nation had some idea of what was happening in Tokyo-3. Without the Avas, the UN forces had nothing in their plans other than to drop an N2 mine into Tokyo-3, given as the enemy didn't seem to possess an AT field. That was vetoed quickly. Scout VTOLs were quickly shot down by darts of dark bone as soon as they entered a 2-kilometre airspace. The sky was dark, some stars already out. Kaoru laughed. He stood on top of a tall building, watching over the destruction.
So much death,
he shouted in glee.
Such glorious death!
Little beings, these Lilim. Inbreeding so quickly, their survival method was to ensure at least some of the species would escape. That was not so different from mice and other small prey. And yet they fought to assign such importance to the individual anyway. How foolish. They dared to believe they were ultimate predators in their world. He laughed and laughed. This is reality, little creatures. These are the true predators, the greatest and most terrible race to ever grace the stars. He stopped suddenly, though his amusement didn't diminish.
Oh,
Kaoru grinned even more. So he's awake.
Can we launch with our limited power? Futsuki asked. Running off battery charge. I never thought NERV would have to take power from the Eva. We can't use the linear launcher, but there is the path that the Trident used to get down here, Ritsuko reported. Only the core command center has power from 4 expanded Eva battery packs, 2 more to operate the elevators. That leaves the other 2 Evangelions with emergency power of 5 minutes each, and Unit 1 with the Titan module's unremovable shoulder power packs, which gives it 6 hours. But we're also draining that with every second we've got lights on here in the Eva cages.
Where is the third child? Asked Gendo.
Unfortunately, he shows signs of extreme fatigue and shock. There are also injuries consistent with having fallen from a high place, though no bones were broken.
Use Unit 1 to provide power then. Launch Ava 0 and 2. Her reply was cut off as a small commotion on the end of the observation gantries drew her attention. She stood there surrounded by NERV workers unwilling to touch him. Shinji Akari. His look was haggard, and he hobbled to them on crutches. Ava Unit 2 turned its head, and Asuka's voice issued forth.
What the hell are you doing here, Shinji? We can handle this!
Yes, there is no further need to strain yourself, the orange Ava added.
Shinji ignored them, heading over directly to Gendo. Both Akari stared at each other with measuring glasses. Let me fight, father, he said. I know what's happening out there. I need to pilot the Ava. In your condition? Ridiculous. Gendo stared down at the spectacle of utter weakness. You are not needed here. Go. Shinji turned to Ritsuko. My physical condition doesn't matter. It's all about sync with the Ava, right? Only Principio Aterna has the excess power. At least I can try to deploy its AT field to help.
Well, that is true. The body doesn't really matter, only the connection.
That was the whole point of the dummy plugs, after all. There need not be a whole body inside.
It's too risky.
The risk is immaterial compared to letting that angel kill even more with every passing minute. There's a time for strategy, there's a time for tactics, Fuyutsuki said aside. And there's a time for brute force. In a lower tone. Ikari, when it comes to beating an enemy quickly, the boy does it best. You know this.
Hey, if I had the chain axe, it would be different. But I don't see a problem with it. His Ava does have more immediate power available to it, and that's one big enemy. By the time we get up there, we'd barely have enough power to do anything,
Asuka put in, shrugging unconcerned. She looked at her own right hand, clenching and opening it up again and again. She was a human, having her own power. Humans. As soon as they knew something was possible, they'd find a way. She could be a god. She grinned savagely.
If we can get our Ava's external power, we can head out on the linear catapult to help or be here in reserve in case he fails, to defend the geofront.
I concur with Soryu, Ray added. It is a sound tactical consideration.
Launch me, damn it! Shinji shouted, his voice hoarse. Father, please! Gendo tightened his expression and looked away. The Evangelion rose into a city that was burning. That was the only light to break apart the darkness. Shrieks and screams were carried by the night winds. The Evangelion roared. Principio Aterna was angry. Matarael was tall and for its size nearly unseen, so dark in itself. It was weeping acid, eating into the layers of armor plate over the geofront. It stopped and turned, its great eye blinking. It shot long eyelash barbs at the Ava. Shinji raised his AT field. The darts just passed through, phase-shifting through phase-shifted space and lodged deep into the Evangelion's chest and arm armor. The pain was excruciating. Poison and nerve toxins were mixing with the LCL. He stood there unmoving. He was looking at a slumped silhouette. He switched on lamps on Titanicus armor. The lucky ultramarine blue of Tident Land Dreadnought was scarred and scorched. Mana! He shouted. He could see her. The command compartment of Magnos Tancred was torn open, and there she was, bloody and unmoving and unhearing. Mana. Live. Please be alive. The angel released more white pods, and these fell upon the Evangelion. They all then exploded. The Ava remained still.
Enji-kun.
So many dead. I am the hope and the fury of man, and I can't bring back the dead. Matarael lifted a leg, the tip of that sharp beyond measure. It was massive, a spear to cut through any armor. It stabbed at the Ava's chest, so fast. The master chainsword sang, and lopped off the tip just as it was about to reach. The Evangelion slid back, taking the sudden weight. Instead of being impaled, it had stuck the Vulcan mega bolter into the oozing cavity. Shinji pulled the trigger, and Matarael screamed. Its leg right up to the joint was shredded to pieces. It fell. All the angel spawns screeched angrily. And Principio Aterna roared, its fury greater than it had ever let free before. It set the light of its soul unsealed to the furthest reaches. All felt it. A man stopped all thought, even as an angel spawn was chewing on his arm. That too had paused.
He's here at last,
he wept. And the creature that had killed his wife, that was eating him alive, just exploded. He was drenched in orange goo. All over the city, every angel spawn abruptly ceased to be. And Principio Aterna leapt, its chain sword singing its litany of fury. The Evangelion landed upon Matarael's massive discoid body. The Evangelion knew the enemy was big. Too big. Its core. Where's its core? It couldn't kill the enemy so simply. Not even all three Avas could destroy it in one shot. The enemy had prepared for that. No matter. The Evangelion snarled. It tossed away the Megavolta, unlatched the master chainsword from its bracer and held it two-handed. Matarael let out a scream of angry warning, and Principio Aterna cut into the angel and began to tear it to pieces from the inside. The angel screamed. It writhed and rolled in unimaginable pain. Deep within, the Evangelion cut and slashed and ripped and teared, and everyone could feel its rage and its despair. Kaoru rinsed and walked away. One more sacrifice for the eventual victory of his kind. Ikari was strong. It would be good to have that strength. The angel died messily, but nothing Shinji Ikari could do would ever make things all right again. Principio Aterna broke through the eye and back to the street, steaming with angel acid. It roared again, but this time in anguish. It no longer felt the light of the being within it.
It's getting even warmer now that the air is getting stagnant. It's hard to believe that this base has the world's most advanced technology.
Yeah, but look at the commanders. Even in this heat, they're still so cool and in command.
It's hot? Yes.